fire. Not a spark, not a neat little jet like you see in class. A living wall of blue-white flame roaring across a black underground lake, inferi shrieking as they burn. And in the middle of it, Dumbledore just walks forward, robes barely fluttering, like he's taking a midnight stroll and not casually rewriting the laws of thermodynamics. Let's start with this cave. You know the one. The green potion, the cursed lake, the zombie army that would absolutely have eaten a third year alive. This isn't Lumos. This isn't Expelliarmus. This is fire that behaves like it's listening to him. It parts around the boat, clings to the inferi, bends with a single sweep of his arm. No incantation we can hear. No cute little wrist flick. Just will, focus, and something older than the Hogwarts syllabus. Look, nobody was surprised that Dumbledore was powerful. The man treats unbreakable vows like mildly interesting paperwork. But what you're seeing here doesn't feel like the same system of magic you use to light your wand or levitate a feather. It's bigger. It bends the entire environment, ignores normal spell rules, and feels almost sentient. Yeah. Take a moment. Because if you're wondering, wait, how is this the same universe where Seamus can't keep a teacup from exploding? You're asking the right question. The wizarding world loves to pretend it's all one thing. You wave a wand, say the Latin, something happens. But scenes like this cave-crack that illusion wide open. They imply a hidden ladder of magical power, a scale where at the bottom you've got accidental magic and first-year chaos, and at the top you've got wizards who are basically walking natural disasters, which, if you've been paying attention, explains a lot. Why most adults struggle with nonverbal spells while Dumbledore is casually doing wandless, environment-warping firestorms. Why the unforgivable curses need real intent and strength, and half the class in Moody's lesson probably couldn't Crucio a spider properly. Why some people end up as animagi, seers, or metamorph magi, and others are just happy if their Patronus doesn't come out looking like damp smoke. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly where that cave scene sits on a 10-level magic scale. We're talking clumsy first-year charms, AOL and new T-tier spellcraft, dark arts like Horcruxes and blood magic, all the way up to the kind of ancient protections Dumbledore calls old magic and refuses to fully explain. The stuff behind Lily's sacrifice, the Elder Wand's ridiculous behavior, and enchantments that existed before wands were even a thing. We'll get to that later. For now, picture this as our finish line. Reality warping, pre-wand enchantments that even Voldemort couldn't control. And in this episode, we're climbing from the bottom to the top, one level at a time, using canon feats, character moments, and a little bit of spicy power scaling. Once you see how magic actually scales in Harry Potter, you will never look at a simple Lumos the same way again. So if magic can go from Lumos, please, to I rewrote the rules of death, how do we actually measure that? Let's start with this. The books never hand us a neat tier list. No stat sheets, no power rankings, not even a ministry infographic, which, if you've been paying attention, tracks with their general level of competence. But buried in canon, you can feel a hidden ladder. Spell difficulty ramps up. Hogwarts classes get nastier. Certain characters start doing things that make everyone else in the room go quiet. From accidental magic to ancient protections, there's a real power curve, and we can reverse engineer it into 10 clean levels without breaking canon. When we say level, we're not just talking raw magical nukes. This isn't Dragon Ball, Wand Edition. A level is a mix of 4 things: how much power you can channel, how much control you have, how versatile your spell list is, and what rare branches of magic you can access. Someone who can only shout Expelliarmus loudly is not on the same level as somebody casually slipping into your mind, becoming an animal at will, and layering ancient wards over their house like magical bubble wrap. So, take legilimency and occlumency. That's not just, I read your diary. That's invasive mind magic that Snape uses to bully teenagers and Voldemort uses to manipulate entire wars. Animagus transformation? That's a whole separate grind. Years of training, complex potions, strict registration laws that Sirius Black looked at and said, nope. Then you've got metamorph magi like Tonks, who don't even need spells to shapeshift. Different branches, different flexes, same ladder. Here's the rough climb. Level 1 is the wild stuff, accidental magic in kids, triggered by pure emotion. Dudley's glass, Aunt Marge inflating, Harry teleporting onto a school roof. Zero control, huge chaos. Level 2 is your basic Hogwarts starter pack. Lumos, Wingardium Leviosa, Alohomora. You say the words, swish and flick, hope for the best. Mid-levels? That's where it gets serious. Owl and Newty magic, non-verbal casting, proper combat spells, Patronuses, and yes, the dark arts. The unforgivable curses sit up here because they need power and intent to work. Not every wizard can cast them, and some who try just fizzle. Yeah, take a moment. At the top, we're talking spell creation, soul magic, and primordial protections. Horcruxes, blood wards like Lily's sacrifice, the Elder Wand amplifying an already terrifying wizard, the enchantments baked into Hogwarts itself. This is the stuff even Dumbledore calls ancient magic, and politely refuses to footnote. And if you're wondering where your faves land on this scale, we'll get to that later. Some fan favorites are way higher or lower than fandom usually places them. Harry, Hermione, Snape, Voldemort, Dumbledore, even Neville with his disaster to legend arc. They all slot into specific levels with receipts from the text. By the end, you'll know exactly where everyone sits on the ladder. And for now, let's celebrate the fact that first-year you was out here struggling with feathers while other people were quietly rewriting reality. Level 1 is where magic is stupidly powerful and absolutely useless at the same time. This is raw chaos. Pre-Hogwarts. No wand, no Latin, no homework chart from Hermione. Just a terrified kid and the universe going, all right, I'll help. Badly. Let's start with what it actually is. Accidental magic is the base layer of the whole system. Wild, emotional outbursts that happen when magical children are scared, furious, or desperate. No incantation, no practiced wand movement, not even a conscious decision. It's the magical core slamming the emergency button and firing off whatever it can manage in the moment. If you're wondering what that looks like in practice, Harry Potter is basically the poster child. At the zoo, he's trapped with Dudley and the world's worst parenting. Dudley shoves him, Harry gets angry, and the glass on the boa constrictor tank just vanishes. No warning, no spell, just instant jailbreak, and one very confused snake. That's level 1. Reality glitches around a kid's feelings. Same thing with his hair. Aunt Petunia gives him that horrific haircut. He goes to bed humiliated, and wakes up with all his hair regrown overnight. Not a glamour charm, not a potion. Just sheer willpower and embarrassment teaming up to say, absolutely not. The magic listens to emotion before it ever listens to words. And then, Aunt Marge. Yeah, take a moment. This isn't tiny stuff floating around the room. This is a grown woman literally inflating like a balloon and drifting away because Harry finally snaps after years of abuse. He doesn't shout a spell. He doesn't even mean to. His anger just grabs the nearest possibility and cranks it to 11. Look, nobody was surprised to learn that magic is innate in this world, but accidental magic is the receipts. It proves that underneath all the fancy wand work, the real engine is emotion and willpower. Spells, incantations, wands, they're like user manuals and focusing tools. The raw energy is already there, pulsing in every magical kid before their Hogwarts letter ever shows up, which, if you've been paying attention, should make you very suspicious about what the top levels of this scale are going to look like when people learn to tap that same instinct on purpose. Now imagine going through this as a Muggle-born. No wizarding parents. No, "Oh, that's just accidental magic, dear." You get angry and the lights explode. You get scared and you teleport onto the roof. You cry and the dishes repair themselves. Terrifying. Isolating. You don't think, "I'm gifted." You think, "I'm cursed," until McGonagall shows up in your living room like a very stern tech support agent for your soul. Level 1 looks weak because it's messy and unpredictable, but the scale of some of these accidents is insane. Vanishing structural glass. Rewriting your own body overnight. Turning a human into a living balloon animal. That's not baby magic. That's untrained magic. And if this is what it does when nobody's aiming it, what happens at level 2 when someone finally puts a wand in that kid's hand and teaches them to point? Level 2 is where magic stops being a jump scare and starts getting a syllabus. The chaos gets lesson plans. This is the training wheels stage, spells with names, wand movements, and homework, where your wild emotional power is squeezed into neat little packets like Lumos, Wingardium Leviosa, Alohomora, and baby defensive spells that could barely intimidate a Cornish pixie. Let's start with what actually changes. At level 1, magic just happens to you. At level 2, you're told exactly how to make it happen again, safely, in a classroom where your biggest threat is a stern look from McGonagall. First-year classes are obsessed with safety, pronunciation, and wand discipline, because if you've been paying attention, the wizarding world has learned the hard way what happens when 11-year-olds improvise. Charms with Flitwick? It's not just say the word and hope. It's swish and flick, exact syllables, and a professor literally measuring how high your feather floats. Defense against the dark arts? You're not summoning Patronuses. You're learning to block basic jinxes and maybe disarm someone if they're being extremely cooperative. Even Lumos is taught like a lab experiment. Correct grip, clear intent, no blinding your classmates, intentionally. And nobody represents level 2 mastery better than Hermione Granger. She walks into Hogwarts like she already did the reading, the homework, and the extra credit assignment that doesn't exist yet. She nails Wingardium Leviosa on day 1 of practical use, gets her feather floating beautifully, and then casually pulls off Alohomora to break into a forbidden corridor after curfew. Model student. Also, tiny criminal. Compare that to Seamus Finnegan, patron saint of "it technically worked, but also exploded." Same level, same instructions, same spells. His attempts at basic charms keep ending in singed eyebrows and small fireballs. It's not that he has less magic, it's that level 2 is brutally honest about control. The power is there. The discipline is apparently on backorder. Look at Ron in that first Wingardium Leviosa lesson. Wrong emphasis, sloppy wand movement, zero focus, and the feather just sits there, judging him. Hermione corrects the pronunciation, does the motion exactly. Focuses like her entire academic career depends on this one moment, and boom. Perfect feather float. Same classroom, same spell, wildly different results. Intent and understanding already separate the kids who can repeat a spell from the ones who can actually wield it. And here's the sneaky part. Level 2 feels cute and harmless, But some of these baby spells are time bombs. Wingardium Leviosa in the hands of an 11-year-old? Funny floating feathers. Wingardium-style levitation in the hands of a level 8 or 9 wizard. Think boulders, buildings, or people being yanked off the ground like puppets. Lumos is a reading light now. Scaled up, light and visibility become battlefield control, interrogation tools, even ways to expose hidden magic. For now, let's celebrate the innocence of first-year magic, because it doesn't stay this safe. These training wheels are secretly the foundation of everything that comes next. You've seen what happens when kids get control. Next, we need to talk about what happens when they start pushing past the lesson plan. Level 3 is where you stop being a walking health hazard and start being a functional member of the wizarding world. This is the OWL level sweet spot. Solid charms, respectable transfiguration, potions that don't explode every lesson, and basic defensive magic that actually works when somebody points a wand at your face. Let's start with what that looks like, day to day. At level 3, you're not just shouting Lumos and hoping. You've got a reliable stunning spell in your pocket. Stupefy doesn't fizzle, it drops people. Your shield charm, Protego, isn't a sad little shimmer. It can block jinxes and minor curses, especially if you're not being ambushed by a Death Eater with anger issues. You can cast Reducto without accidentally turning the entire hallway into dust. You're still using spoken incantations, but your wand work is clean, repeatable, and you can do it under pressure. Transfiguration-wise, this is where things get flashy. We're talking about the level where McGonagall has you turning animals into water goblets and back again, and it actually works more than once in a row. You understand switching spells, vanishing small objects, maybe even some basic conjuration if you're particularly competent. It's not creative genius, but it's consistent. And in magic, consistency is terrifyingly powerful. Potions at level 3 are a huge glow-up from Neville melted another cauldron. You can follow a recipe, control your stirring, time your simmering, and end up with a sleeping draft that behaves like a sleeping draft, not a temporary coma with regret. You're brewing standard antidotes, decent healing brews, maybe even a passable strengthening solution. If you're wondering where the line is, if Madame Pomfrey would actually use your potion on a patient, you're firmly in level 3 territory. The best early examples? Dumbledore's army in Order of the Phoenix. These are 5th years, allegedly still in the please don't die in class phase, and they're firing off Stupefy, Protego, Reducto, disarming charms, and even some Patronuses while being chased through the Department of Mysteries. That's early level 3, punching slightly above their grade, because desperation plus good teaching is a wild combo. They're not masters, but they can stand in a real fight and not instantly die. Low bar, but still. Look, nobody was surprised that most of the background adults in the series probably cap out right around here. The random ministry clerk? The witch running the robe shop? They can duel a bit, apparate without leaving a leg behind, fix their roof with reparo, and not blow up their kettle every time they try a heating charm. They're competent, employable, and safe to sit next to on the night bus, but they're nowhere near Snape, McGonagall, or even a battle-ready Auror. And this is where the real separation starts. Level 3 is still textbook magic, spoken incantations, clear wand movements, recipes you follow line by line. The moment you move into non-verbal casting, custom spell work, and magic that starts poking at ethics, curses, mind arts, soul-adjacent weirdness, we're in a different neighborhood. We'll get to that later, because level 4 is where the training wheels come off and the spells start looking back at you. Level 4 is where Hogwarts stops being a slightly dangerous boarding school and starts looking like a pre-Auror boot camp. This is Newt level magic, plus one more ingredient. The textbooks don't advertise real fear, real duels, real stakes. Let's start with what advanced student actually means. You're in 6th or 7th year, you've survived wields, and you're now doing the kind of coursework that quietly assumes you might end up on a battlefield. Nonverbal magic stops being this mysterious adult party trick and becomes homework. Snape literally stands there in half-blood prints like, "Say nothing, mean it harder." If you're wondering why that matters, it's because once you can cast without speaking, you can fight without telegraphing your next move. At level 4, Transfiguration gets properly terrifying. We're not talking match to needle anymore. We're talking animating desks to tackle people, turning ropes into snakes, partial human transformations that flirt with the line between legal spellwork and McGonagall is going to have a word. This is the level where you could, in theory, transfigure the floor under someone's feet mid-duel. Environmental control, instant chaos, very fun, very illegal if you're not careful. Defensive magic ramps up too. Shield charms go from Protego, "Please don't let this sting," to proper concussive barriers that can knock curses away and occasionally knock people over. You see this with the DA in Deathly Hallows, teenagers throwing up shields that actually hold against grown Death Eaters. They're not dominating the fight, but they're not instantly vaporized either, which, if you've been paying attention, is a massive power jump from first-year jelly-legs nonsense. Offense gets sharper, and a lot darker. Spells like Reducto graduate from blow up a table to, oh, that could take a limb off if you're not careful. Harry in the Department of Mysteries is already flirting with this, but by 6th year and the war, that kind of magic becomes standard. Stunning spells are fired rapid fire. Disarming becomes almost polite compared to what people are actually throwing in a real battle. And then you have the new T-level potions and charms that make level 4 wizards tactically dangerous. Felix Felicis is the obvious star. Brewed correctly, it turns you into probability's favorite child for a day. Advanced healing brews, stronger blood-replenishing potions, and counter curses mean you can keep yourself and your friends in the fight longer. Charms to reinforce walls, ignite barriers, flood a corridor, or black out a room give you control over the entire battlefield, not just the wand tip in your hand. Hermione in 6th year is the poster child for this tier. She's brewing complex potions, mastering nonverbal spells, and in Deathly Hallows, she's apparating under fire, throwing shields, and using the environment like a weapon. The DA kids at Hogwarts? They end up holding corridors, coordinating ambushes, surviving direct engagements with Death Eaters. These are level 4 fighters, not legends, but absolutely problems. For now, let's celebrate them as the last stop before things get truly weird. Because level 5 is where magic stops being what you learned at school and starts becoming who you are, your obsessions, your secrets, and the parts of you you really don't want your wand amplifying. Yeah. Take a moment. You're not ready for who lives up there. Level 5 is where magic gets personal. Up to now, you've been learning what everyone learns. Charms, jinxes, maybe the occasional slightly illegal hex on your least favorite cousin. But at this stage, a witch or wizard branches off into specialist paths. Animagus transformation, true seer abilities, the mind arts of legilimency and occlumency, and a bunch of weird niche talents that make the rest of the wizarding world go, I'm sorry, you can do what? Let's start with Animagi. This is not, I turned my teacup into a tortoise transfiguration. This is, I turned myself into a whole animal and kept my brain. It's learned. It's insanely difficult. And it's so regulated the ministry literally keeps a registry. McGonagall is the poster child, a registered animagus who can flick into a cat with square spectacles. That's someone who took standard transfiguration and cranked it past new T level into my body is now optional territory. Then you've got the Marauders. James Potter and Sirius Black ended up as unregistered animagi, which, if you've been paying attention, is wildly illegal and also wildly impressive. They pulled it off as teenagers, together with Peter, just to support Remus during full moons. That's level 5 energy right there. Not just talent, but obsession. Months of dangerous, meticulous work for a form of magic that almost nobody else even attempts. Now swing to the opposite vibe, seers. Sybil Trelawney spends most of her time predicting death every Tuesday before lunch, but buried inside the drama is something terrifyingly real. True prophecy in Harry Potter is rare, involuntary, and doesn't care if you passed divination. When Trelawney locks into that harsh, echoing voice and drops the prophecy about Voldemort and Harry, she's tapping into a deeper magical current than anything on a Hogwarts exam. You can't revise your way into that. You either are a seer or you're not. Pattern interrupt. This is the only level where you can literally be asleep and accidentally alter the fate of the wizarding world. No wand, no incantation. Just your mouth deciding destiny while you black out in a sherry haze. Then we get to the mind arts, legilimency and occlumency. If you're wondering why this feels scarier than a stunner, it's because it is. Legilimency isn't reading minds like a cheap party trick. It's invading memories, emotions, and thoughts. Voldemort is a terrifyingly gifted legilimens, ripping through people's defenses like they're made of tissue paper. Snape, meanwhile, is the guy who can both attack and defend, which makes him one of the most quietly dangerous wizards in the series. Occlumency is the shield to that sword. It's all about emotional discipline, compartmentalization, and refusing to let anyone in. Snape tells Harry to clear his mind. Harry does the exact opposite. He's messy, reactive, full of feelings, and a completely reluctant student. Look, nobody was surprised that his occlumency career is a disaster montage. The key thing with level 5? It's not always about raw power. McGonagall isn't throwing bigger spells than everyone else because she's an animagus. Trelawney isn't stronger than Flitwick. These are depth builds, not damage builds. Wizards at this level have drilled down into one branch of magic until it becomes part of their identity. And if you're thinking, okay, what happens when someone has that kind of specialization and then stacks it with sheer magical power? We'll get to that later. Level 6 is where the battlefield starts bending around the wizard, not the other way around. Level 6 is where magic stops being karaoke and starts being a solo album. Spoken spells? Training wheels. At this tier, you're looking at witches and wizards who can cast non-verbally on command and, at least sometimes, wandlessly. The spell isn't living in the Latin anymore. It's living in their head. Let's start with what that actually looks like at Hogwarts. By 6th year, Defense Against the Dark Arts basically goes, okay kids, no more shouting Expelliarmus like you're in a school play. The curriculum explicitly demands non-verbal casting. You're supposed to think the spell, focus the intent, and fire. And if you're wondering how that goes, spoiler, badly. Most of the class can't pull off anything more impressive than a weak jinx. Harry, who's already survived Voldemort multiple times, struggles with it. That's how steep this jump is. Non-verbal magic is hard because it rips away your safety net. The incantation is like a set of training wheels and a cheat sheet glued together. It structures your intent, focuses your magic, and tells your brain, do the thing now. Once you take that away, you're left with raw willpower, precision, and control. You don't get to hide behind pronunciation. You either know what you're doing, or you're just glaring at your opponent and hoping they fall over from awkwardness. Now crank that up to wandless. We see little flashes of this all over the series. Dumbledore summoning the cushions for Harry in his office with a casual gesture. Snape slamming doors or flinging Harry backward with barely a flick. Voldemort binding Harry in the graveyard without needing a full dramatic wand flourish. These are the high-end level 6 users, the people for whom magic is basically an extra limb. They can summon, bind, and even throw up defenses with minimal movement because the wand is an amplifier, not a crutch. Look, nobody was surprised that Dumbledore and Voldemort operate here like it's their default setting. When Dumbledore duels in the Ministry, he's chaining non-verbal spells so fast you barely know what's happening. Fiery rope, water prison, teleporting Harry out of the way. It's like watching someone play the Wizarding World on speedrun mode. Voldemort, meanwhile, casually casts silent killing curses, because of course he does. Why does this matter so much in a duel? Simple. If your opponent can't hear your spell, they can't pre-counter it. Nonverbal casting removes the telegraph. Wandless casting removes the "oops, I dropped my stick" problem. You can fight while silenced, disarmed, or pretending to surrender. Magic becomes closer to pure intent. Whoever can shape their will faster wins. Yeah, take a moment. And once you're at the point where you can cast silently, and sometimes without a wand at all, something else unlocks. You're no longer just following the recipe. You're tasting the ingredients. Wizards at this level start tweaking spell power, stretching effects, combining charms in weird ways. For now, let's celebrate that as terrifying. Because the next step after this isn't just better duelist. It's, I'm going to bend magic itself, invent new spells, twist old ones, and walk straight into the territory of true dark arts. We'll get to that later. Level 7s is where the safety rails come off. Up to now, magic has been scary, chaotic, maybe even lethal, but it hasn't automatically tried to rot you from the inside. This is the line where spellwork stops being dangerous tool and starts being inherently corrupting. We're talking unforgivable curses, blood wards, and anything that brushes up against the soul. Let's start with the unforgivables, because obviously. The Wizarding World doesn't throw that label around lightly. Avada Kedavra, Cruciatus, Imperius. They're not just illegal. They're built so that you have to twist yourself to use them properly. You can memorize the incantation, get the wand movement perfect, and still fail if you don't have the right intent. It's not like Wingardium Leviosa, where the worst that happens is you smack Seamus in the face with a feather. Look, nobody was surprised that teenage wannabe Death Eaters in class couldn't do these on command. Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as Moody, literally tells them it takes powerful magic to cast a successful Unforgivable. You need enough raw power, sure, but you also need to mean it. Imperius demands that you genuinely want to overwrite someone's will. Cruciatus needs you to want to cause pain for pain's sake. Avada Kedavra? You have to fully intend that someone stops existing. No hesitation. No flinching. If you're wondering how messed up that gets, enter Bellatrix Lestrange. Bellatrix torturing Neville's parents into insanity is the gold standard of Cruciatus horror. She isn't just strong, she loves it. Her curse works because her hatred and sadism are dialed to 11. When she tries the same curse on Harry in the Department of Mysteries, it barely works. Why? He's angry, but he doesn't want to torture. He wants answers. The magic knows. Cruciatus scales off cruelty, not just magical muscle, which, if you've been paying attention, makes it a sick, inverted cousin of Lily's love protection. Because here's the twist. Soul-adjacent magic isn't always stamped dark. Lily's sacrifice is technically blood magic. Her willing death wraps baby Harry in a protection that lives in his blood, strong enough that Voldemort literally can't touch him for years. Then Voldemort comes back, looks at this ancient, sacrificial enchantment, and says, "Cool, I'll hack that." He uses Harry's blood in his resurrection ritual so he can bypass the protection without breaking it. That's blood magic too. Same category, wildly different morals. Blood wards, sacrificial protections, inherited enchantments. This is all level 7 territory. Ancient, powerful, morally loaded, but not automatically evil. It depends what you're willing to offer up. Your safety? Your body? Somebody else's? Because once you're comfortable messing with blood and intent, and the edges of the soul, you are one step away from the darkest spell work in the series. You start asking, what if I didn't just protect a life? What if I refused to let mine end? Yeah, take a moment. Level 8 is where someone actually answers that question and splits their soul to do it. Level 8 is where magic stops being a school subject and starts being software development for reality. This is the realm of spell creators and soul manipulators, the witches and wizards who don't just cast from the menu, they rewrite the rulebook. Let's start with the poster child for extra credit madness, Severus Snape, the half-blood prince. While everyone else is scribbling swish and flick in their first-year notes, Snape is out here in the margins inventing entirely new spell lines. Sectum Sempra isn't just a nasty hex, it's custom-built magical code that mimics a slashing blade, keyed to silent casting and brutal intent. That means he understands how words, wand movement, and willpower lock together under the hood, and it's not a one-off. Levicorpus, the classic dangle your enemy by the ankle special, is wandless in the original form. Muffliato fills people's ears with buzzing so they can't eavesdrop. These are weirdly specific, highly optimized spells, which, if you've been paying attention, tells you Snape isn't just good at magic. He's reverse engineering the entire system while pretending to mark essays. If you're wondering how deep that goes, look at his potions textbook. The Half-Blood Prince doesn't just follow recipes. He rewrites them. Different slicing angles, altered brewing times, one tiny clockwise stir instead of counterclockwise, and suddenly a mediocre school potion turns into liquid perfection. That's level 8 energy too. Understanding magic so well you can refactor it for better performance, whether it's a jinx or a Bezoar antidote. But spell invention is only half of this tier. The other half is where things get properly horrifying. Horcrux-level dark arts. To make a Horcrux, you don't just say a word and go home. You commit murder, then perform a complex, unnamed ritual that literally rips your soul and anchors a fragment into a physical object with layered enchantments. Protection, concealment, durability, sometimes active defenses like the Cursed Ring or the Inferi-filled cave. That is soul manipulation at industrial scale, and it puts Voldemort firmly in level 8. He doesn't just split his soul once, he turns it into a 7-part group project nobody asked to join. Diadem, locket, diary, snake, ring, cup, accidental boy who lived add-on. Look, nobody was surprised he ended up a noseless wraith. Actions have skincare consequences. And it's not just Horcruxes. Designing something like the protection on 12 Grimmauld Place, or the layered enchantments around the Chamber of Secrets entrance, lives here too. Complex, stacked spells on objects and locations, interacting together without blowing up the wizarding world. That's level 8 craftsmanship. For now, let's celebrate that. As terrifying as this is, it's still normal magic. Wands, incantations, runes, potions, it all operates inside the modern framework. Because the really wild part? The next levels start to break that framework entirely. What happens when you stop needing the wand at all? Level 9 is where the wand system hits its hard cap. This is the apex of modern taught-in-a-classroom magic. We're talking witches and wizards who don't just pass newts. They basically write the textbooks, invent new spells, and walk into a duel knowing they can outcast almost anyone alive. If you're wondering where Dumbledore and Voldemort sit on our ladder, this is their floor. Let's start with Dumbledore. The man's magical resume reads like a brag sheet written by Hogwarts itself. As a teenager, he's dueling Grindelwald, the other most dangerous wizard of the century, and decades later, he still walks into that famous 1945 fight and wins. In the cave, he doesn't just make fire, he commands it, building a living inferno that obeys him like a trained dragon. That's not just incendio, but bigger. That's total elemental control inside the wand framework. And while everyone else is gossiping about the Deathly Hallows like they're Wizarding World fan theories, Dumbledore actually tracks them, studies them, and understands what they are. He figures out the Elder Wand's blood-soaked logic, recognizes the resurrection stone hidden in a ring, and then uses the cloak as part of a multi-layered, long-term protection plan for Harry. The blood protection, the sacrificial magic, the way he times the Horcrux hunt so Harry walks into his own death exactly when the soul math works out? That's system-level mastery. He isn't just good at spells, he's designing campaigns. Voldemort, meanwhile, is the corrupted mirror of that same level. He rips his soul apart into multiple Horcruxes, which, if you've been paying attention, is already way past what any normal dark wizard even attempts. He's an elite duelist, casually throwing unforgivable curses like they're greeting cards. He's a brutal legilimens, tearing into people's minds without a wand, and then he takes it further by literally flying without visible support. No broom, no thestral, just pure dark arts-powered movement. Yeah, take a moment. But it's how he combines it all that makes him level 9. Dark arts plus psychological warfare plus politics. He weaponizes fear, propaganda, and that creepy psychic connection with Harry together with his spell work. He isn't just blasting doors off hinges, he's breaking institutions. Now, drop the Elder Wand into this mix. The wand is built to amplify whoever holds it. It doesn't turn Draco, I can't disarm a school kid without panicking Malfoy, into an unstoppable god. In his hand, it's a very fancy, very confused stick. But in Dumbledore's hand, it's a magical nuke. It scales with the user, which is why his duel with Voldemort in the Ministry feels like watching two entire libraries of magic trying to kill each other. So level 9 is the ceiling of wand-centric, textbook-shaped magic. Every spell has a name, every curse has a rule, every ritual still plugs into the system. After this, we stop asking, who's the better duelist, and start asking, what happens when the rules themselves break? Because level 10 is older, weirder, and even these giants are only guessing at how it really works. Level 10 is where magic stops acting like a school subject and starts acting like gravity. You don't learn this stuff. You collide with it. And if you're wondering why even Dumbledore keeps shrugging and saying, ancient magic, this is why. Let's start with the clearest example. Lily Potter. No incantation, no wand movement, just a mother choosing to die instead of stepping aside. That choice triggers a protection so deep that Voldemort literally bounces off a baby. Dumbledore recognizes it, names it as magic older than written spells, but he can't footnote it. It's rooted in love, intent, and a willing sacrifice, and it latches onto Harry's blood like a permanent enchantment. That's why the Dursleys' house matters. Petunia's blood connects to Lily's, which, if you've been paying attention, turns Privet Drive into a walking, talking blood ward. Harry is safe not because of security charms, but because an ancient rule says, "You don't touch this kid while he can call this place home." That's level 10. It cares about choices, promises, and family ties more than spellbooks. Hogwarts itself is basically a cathedral of this stuff. The founders didn't just slap on some Protegos and call it a day. They built a castle that rearranges its own staircases, seals itself in times of crisis, and quietly judges your soul the second you walk through the doors. The Sorting Hat isn't just a quirky prop. It's a semi-sentient artifact stuffed with their combined intelligence, still making nuanced calls 1,000 years later. Then you've got the Room of Requirement, which feels like the castle looking at your search history and deciding what you need. It appears, vanishes, morphs into a bathroom or a war room or a contraband warehouse, operating on intention instead of incantation. Nobody knows the spell that made it. Nobody can reproduce it. It just is. Same with the castle's defenses during the Battle of Hogwarts, when statues wake up, shields lock into place, and the building itself joins the fight. Yeah, take a moment. And hovering over all of this, the Deathly Hallows. The Elder Wand, Resurrection Stone, and Invisibility Cloak are technically objects, but they behave like loopholes in the magical operating system. The Elder Wand doesn't just cast stronger spells, it amplifies a skilled wizard to absurd levels and cares about ownership in a way normal wands don't. The stone drags echoes of the dead across some invisible boundary. The cloak doesn't fray, doesn't weaken, and hides you from death's notice itself. United, they don't just make you powerful. They put you in conversation with death and destiny, which is the most level 10 sentence I will ever say. This is the tier where magic stops being a tool and becomes a law of the universe. You can invoke it, align with it, sometimes accidentally trigger it, but you never fully control it. And as we start ranking characters and events, we're going to keep asking a dangerous question. Who actually touches this level? And who pays the price for trying? So let's test this dangerous question on home turf. If you're wondering where our golden trio actually land on this 10-level scale, yeah. Take a moment, because once you see their numbers, you'll never look at Hermione carried the team memes the same way again. Let's start with Hermione. Peak academic weapon. By 5th year, she's casually doing non-verbal spells while everyone else is still saying Wingardium Leviosa like it's a tongue twister. Solid level 6, top-tier NUT student power. She masters complex charms, arithmancy, ancient runes, time-turner schedules, and apparently sleep deprivation magic. She understands the theory behind magic in a way most adults don't, which, if you've been paying attention, is exactly what separates level 5 from level 6. But she dips into level 7 when she starts handling stuff like the Time Turner and advanced protective enchantments in Deathly Hallows. She's not inventing new spells or dabbling in real dark arts, though. No Horcrux experiments. No unforgivable curse expertise. She modifies her parents' memories once, hates it, and never turns into a mini Lockhart. That's why she doesn't fully break into the true level 7 researcher and spell creator bracket. Harry is chaos, magic edition. On paper, he's a level 4 to 5 student, decent grades, occasionally forgets homework, spends half his classes arguing with authority or nearly dying. But then you drop him into a duel and he jumps to level 6-7 like someone turned on a cheat code. His specialty is combat magic and defensive spells. Expelliarmus, Protego, Patronus, stunning and shield charms under pressure. This is where he lives. He produces a corporeal Patronus at 13, against hundreds of Dementors. That's advanced adult magic. He resists Imperius, survives multiple killing curses, and leads Dumbledore's army in practical data that outclasses the actual curriculum. And hanging over all of that is Lily's sacrifice, pure level 10 ancient love magic wired directly into his survival. He doesn't control it, but he's literally walking around with a cosmic insurance policy the rest of the wizarding world can't buy. Ron sits in a quieter, very underrated level 4-5 pocket. He's not rewriting textbooks, but he is a competent duelist and a surprisingly strong chessboard strategist who keeps saving their lives with tactics. He's good at practical magic when his insecurity isn't throttling his confidence. Solid shield charms, decent jinxes, quick thinking in the Department of Mysteries, and during the Horcrux heist. This is that mid-tier, reliable working wizard level most people actually end up at. Here's the twist. Together, they punch way above their individual ratings. Hermione brings the brains and deep theory. Harry brings raw willpower, dueling instincts, and that level 10 protection aura. Ron brings planning, tactics, and the, wait, this is a trap energy. That's how 3 teenagers manage to duel Death Eaters, break into Gringotts, and survive a camping trip that should have ended in episode 1. And if you're wondering how they stack against the adults, look, nobody was surprised that some side characters completely outclass them. Snape, McGonagall, the real monsters of the curve. We'll get to that later. So, about those side characters who could delete most teenagers from the dueling club in 5 seconds, let's start with the queen of controlled chaos herself, Minerva McGonagall. On our scale, she's a very comfortable high-level 7, sitting right at the ceiling of what modern, rule-following magic can do. McGonagall isn't just good at transfiguration. She is transfiguration. We're talking registered animagus, turning into a cat so seamlessly that first-years think she's just a cat. She can transform desks into pigs, statues into soldiers, and the entire Great Hall into a fortified war room. During the Battle of Hogwarts, she literally commands suits of armor like a magical RTS game, coordinating defenses while dueling Death Eaters and still having the emotional range to yell, "Potter!" when Harry appears out of nowhere. If you're wondering where she sits in a fight, remember, she helps drive off Severus Snape, a former Death Eater, in a straight duel inside her own school. Which, if you've been paying attention, tells you Snape is even scarier. Snape is our solid level 8. He's not just a good student who liked potions. He invents spells for fun. Sectum Sempra, Levicorpus, that creepy signature curse writing in the Half-Blood Prince's textbook? That's experimental combat magic from a bored teenager who never grew out of it. As an adult, he's a potions genius, brewing wolfsbane and advanced antidotes that almost nobody else can manage. But Snape's real broken skill tree is mental magic. He's an accomplished Occlumens and Legilimens, able to fake out Voldemort himself while feeding Dumbledore information. The wizarding world's 2 greatest manipulators both trust the same pale, greasy bat, which is either the biggest red flag or the strongest endorsement of his level 8 status. Yeah, take a moment. Now, drop down a tier and you get the Marauders, the Chaos Gremlins of levels 5 and 6. James Potter, Sirius Black, and Remus Lupin are not professors, not Dark Lords, just wildly gifted students who decided, you know what this school needs? Illegal transformation. James and Sirius become unregistered animagi to support their werewolf friend, which is both incredibly loyal and incredibly stupid. Their prank magic is borderline experimental, enchanted maps that track every person in Hogwarts, hexes so creative Filch probably has a scrapbook, and dueling skills good enough that adult Death Eaters remember James and Sirius as real threats. And, quietly, in the background, the teachers who make all of them look underqualified. Flitwick is a former dueling champion, casually teaching first year's Wingardium Leviosa while being capable of dropping Death Eaters with precise, surgical charms. Sprout turns herbology into battlefield control, weaponizing Devil's Snare and exploding plants during the Battle of Hogwarts like a cheerful, dirt-covered general. For now, let's celebrate how stacked Hogwarts' faculty actually is. But even McGonagall and Snape are still playing inside the modern magic sandbox. The real boundary pushers, the ones flirting with level 9 and 10? That's where names like Grindelwald and Dumbledore start to bend the rules of the wizarding world itself. And we're about to go there. So if McGonagall and Snape are the honor students of modern magic, where does that leave the bad guys? Let's start with the masks and arm tattoos crowd, your rank and file Death Eaters. These are not clumsy level 2 corridor bullies. Most of them sit around level 4 to 6. They're trained in dark arts, they can sling unforgivable curses if they really mean it, and in groups, they're terrifying. Think Battle of the Department of Mysteries or the Battle of Hogwarts, coordinated volleys of killing curses, fiend fire, anti-apparition jinxes. Together, they're like a very murderous rugby team. But one-on-one against a focused level 7 or 8, they get folded. Fast. Look at how quickly people like McGonagall, Kingsley, and even Tonks start mowing through them when the chaos clears. A handful of high-level defenders can hold off entire squads, which, if you've been paying attention, is why Voldemort is constantly obsessed with recruiting the best, instead of just throwing more bodies at the problem. Quantity helps, but it doesn't close the gap. Now, Bellatrix Lestrange. Different league. If you're wondering where she lands, Bellatrix is a solid level 7, maybe brushing 8 on her best, most unhinged day. She isn't just capable of unforgivable curses, she thrives on them. The books make it clear. Cruciatus needs real sadistic intent to work properly, and Bellatrix treats that like her favorite hobby. She tortures the Longbottoms into insanity, duels Sirius and kills him, and then casually takes on Tonks, Kingsley, and McGonagall at various points without immediately getting flattened. She's a duelist who can handle multiple opponents, fight in a crowded battlefield, and keep her focus while cackling like the world's worst open mic act. The only people who really shut her down are Molly Weasley on a mama bear power spike and Voldemort himself when he's annoyed. Yeah, take a moment. When your ceiling is, "Sometimes Voldemort yells at me," you're not a regular Death Eater, but even Bellatrix is still playing inside Voldemort's sandbox. Grindelwald starts to rewrite the rulebook. We're talking early Voldemort level threat, clean level 9. Master duelist, insanely creative dark wizard, and one of the very few people Dumbledore actively feared. This is the guy who takes over an entire prison fortress, commands loyal fanatics across continents, and duels Dumbledore in a fight so powerful it becomes wizarding world legend. And it's not just raw magical output. Ideology is a force multiplier. Grindelwald and later Voldemort don't just cast spells. They reshape systems around their magic. Propaganda, symbols, enchanted prisons, cursed objects, legislation twisted by fear. Their charisma and vision turn individual power into a magical ecosystem that keeps feeding them more followers, more artifacts, more leverage. That's how you jump from dangerous wizard to civilization-level problem. And we're still not at the ceiling. because above even them sits the stuff they're all chasing: Hallows-level artifacts, Founder-era enchantments, and the weird, nameless magic that makes Hogwarts itself feel alive. What happens when the castle, the relics, and the blood-deep protections start acting like characters in their own right? We'll get to that later. So, when we say Level 10 Ancient Magic, Hogwarts is Exhibit A. The castle is not just a building with good vibes and bad plumbing. It's a layered, magical construct, a literally living system of spells, memory, and intent that's been running for 1,000 years without a single IT update from the Ministry. Let's start with the obvious weirdness: moving staircases that reroute your entire day because they're in a mood, portraits that gossip, spy, deliver messages, and occasionally slut-shame Phineas Nigellus. Suits of armor that fight in wars, a ceiling that mirrors the sky, bathrooms that become mermaid-infested swimming pools if you say the wrong thing. This isn't a bunch of discrete charms. It behaves like one giant integrated spell that keeps rewriting itself. And at the core of that, the founders: Godric Gryffindor, Salazar Slytherin, Rowena Ravenclaw, Helga Hufflepuff. Canon never gives you their stat blocks, but if you're wondering what level 9-10 looks like in human form, it's 4 people who sat down and said, "Let's build a school that reads children's personalities and rearranges reality around them," and then actually did it. Their enchantments don't just last, they adapt. The Sorting Hat was literally Gryffindor's hat, turned into a semi-sentient AI that evaluates courage, ambition, intellect, and loyalty using fragments of all 4 of their minds. The castle shifts staircases and reveals shortcuts when students really need them, which, if you've been paying attention, is exactly what happens every time Harry is on a life-threatening time crunch. The architecture is basically co-parenting the main cast. The clearest level 10 flex is the room of requirement, a room that reads your intent, anticipates needs you haven't fully admitted to yourself, and then generates a fully interactive environment. That's not advanced transfiguration. That's autonomous magic. It hides the entire DA army, becomes a bathroom for Dumbledore's bladder emergency, turns into a Horcrux vault, and casually stores centuries of lost junk. Yeah, take a moment. The room is choosing what to be, who can find it, and what to conceal from everyone else, including Voldemort. Modern wizards can't even agree on how it works. They just shrug and go, "Hogwarts is weird," which is code for, "This is founder-tier sorcery, and we have no idea how to replicate it." Then you've got the wards. Apparition blocked inside the grounds. Certain artifacts can't be summoned out. Protective fields that repel some creatures, confuse intruders, and recognize who belongs enough to enter at all. The castle knows the difference between a student, a teacher, a Death Eater in disguise, and a troll that absolutely did not read the admissions brochure. Look, nobody was surprised that Voldemort had to systematically dismantle protections just to take the place. These are identity-level enchantments, binding people to space, bloodlines to corridors, loyalty to stone. It's the same flavor of ancient magic as Lily's Sacrifice and Grimmauld Place's Fidelius, just scaled up until the school itself is a character. Modern witches and wizards? They're basically tenants in a house built by level 10 architects, hanging fairy lights on walls they don't understand. And Hogwarts is just one example. Because if a building can reach this level, what happens when a wand, or a cloak, or death itself is running the same kind of code? Love as a weapon. Yeah. Take a moment. Because after talking about castles running level 10 code, we have to talk about the one spell that isn't a spell, doesn't need a wand, and still absolutely deletes Voldemort's plans. Let's start with Lily in Godric's Hollow. She's not disarmed, stunned, or tricked. Voldemort literally offers to move aside so he can kill the baby, and she says no. That's not just bravery. That's a conscious, deliberate choice to die for Harry when she had a magical exit ramp. In this world, that level of willing self-sacrifice flips a switch that Dark Lords can't brute force their way through, no matter how many unforgivable curses they've collected. What actually happens when she dies? Dumbledore spells it out. The protection doesn't float in the air like a force field. It sinks into Harry's blood. It's grafted into who he is. That's why Dumbledore can take that protection and stretch it, like magical bubble wrap, over Privet Drive. As long as Harry can call Petunia's house home, the ancient magic rides along with his blood and locks Voldemort out. Petunia signing that letter and taking him in? If you're wondering, that's unintentionally co-signing the strongest protection contract in the wizarding world. And then, years later, Voldemort makes the most poetic mistake imaginable. He uses Harry's blood to rebuild his body. He thinks he's hacking the system, bypassing the protection, when he's actually hardwiring Lily's magic into himself. That's why Harry can survive the killing curse in the forest. Voldemort can't kill the piece of Harry that is living in Voldemort's own blood without unmaking himself. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Now contrast that with Horcruxes. Both are blood and soul level magic. Both permanently change what you are. But one works by murdering someone to tear your soul apart and glue the fragments to random cursed objects. The other works by choosing to die so someone else's soul gets a shield. Same layer of reality. Opposite moral direction. One makes you less human every time you use it. The other makes you more human in a way that keeps echoing after you're gone. This is why Lily's protection is our clearest, cleanest example of level 10 magic. No incantation, no wand movement, no entry in a spellbook. It activates off intent, not technique. It keeps operating for years after the caster is dead, gets extended to a Muggle household, and then piggybacks inside the veins of the guy who tried to erase it. Look, nobody was surprised Dumbledore calls this old magic. It's not advanced charms, it's a different operating system. And if love-based ancient magic is this strong, what else is out there? How many branches of pre-wand magic never made it into textbooks because nobody alive knows how to trigger them anymore? We'll get to that later, when we talk about death, ownership, and why 3 random Hallows feel like they're plugged into the same deep power Lily accidentally proved still exists. So let's talk about the Deathly Hallows, because at this point, they stop feeling like overpowered loot drops and start looking like user manuals for ancient magic. If you're wondering why 3 random objects can bully death, dodge detection, and supercharge spells, it's because they're not just items. They're interfaces. Let's start with the Elder Wand. In-universe marketing calls it the Death Stick, which sounds like something a Slytherin first year would brag about behind the green curtains. But the key detail is this: the wand doesn't create power. It amplifies what's already there. Put it in Draco's nervous little hands, and you get slightly better disarms. Put it in Dumbledore's or Voldemort's, and you get duel scenes that look like the Wizarding World's version of a nuclear arms test. This is level 10 adjacent tech. The wand is basically a magical megaphone, tuned to broadcast the caster's skill and intent at maximum volume. That's why it keeps seeking stronger masters. It wants to be plugged into the biggest power source available, which, if you've been paying attention, is exactly how ancient magic behaves everywhere else. It doesn't babysit you. It scales you. Useless in weak hands, terrifying in the hands of someone who already broke level 9. Now, the Resurrection Stone. The most misleadingly named rock in the series. It doesn't resurrect anything. What it actually does is thin the veil between the living and the dead, pulling echoes, memories, and maybe soul fragments into the room with you. Harry's walk through the forest isn't necromancy. It's a conversation in a corridor where both doors are slightly open. Look at the limitations. The people he brings back are intangible, emotionally heightened, and very aware they're dead. This is not a glitch. It's the stone showing you that death and memory sit on a deeper magical layer, one the wizarding world barely understands because they're too busy flinging stunning spells in corridors. The stone is like a dev build of level 10 death magic, unstable, powerful, and absolutely not meant for casual users. And then you've got the invisibility cloak. Not a charm, not a Weasley product. A literal artifact that resists most detection magic, doesn't degrade over generations, and apparently laughs in the face of time. Other cloaks fray, fade, and start acting like slightly disappointed curtains. This one ends up protecting 3 generations of Potters and still looks ready for a 4th. It feels designed for long-term, narrative-level protection. The cloak doesn't just hide you from Filch on patrol, it hides you from fate long enough to finish your story. That's why death gifting it always reads like a wink. It's not, you get to run away forever. It's, you get to choose when you step into the light. Yeah, take a moment. Put them together, and you don't become a god. You become someone in direct conversation with god-tier forces. Death, ownership, visibility, power. The wand asks, what can you really do? The stone asks, what does death actually mean? The cloak asks, who gets to see you, and when? Unite them, and you're not breaking the rules of magic. You're holding the UI for the rulebook. So if the Hallows are training wheels for gods, who else has been riding this bike without telling anyone? And what did they do to the world when they did? So if the Hallows are training wheels for gods, who's handing out the bikes? Surprise, it's Hogwarts. The cozy castle with moving staircases is secretly a 7-year power curve that lines up almost perfectly with our 10 levels of magic. Let's start with first year. You walk in at level 1-2, raw accidental magic plus baby's first wand, Lumos, Alohomora, Wingardium Leviosa. These aren't just party tricks. They're your intro to structured spellcraft, controlled intent, and not blowing up a feather because you sneezed too hard. By second year, you're solidly level 2, maybe brushing level 3 if you're Hermione doing homework for 3 people. Third and fourth year? The difficulty spikes. You're juggling multiple branches, charms, transfiguration, potions, defense against the dark arts. This is where level 3-4 lives. You're learning counterspells, shield charms, more dangerous transfigurations, and in data, you're already poking at level 7 threats with a stick. Dementors in third year, dragons in fourth. Who signed that permission slip? By fifth year, Hogwarts flips the switch. Owls. Suddenly, magic is a standardized exam and a sorting hat for your future power level. If you're wondering why everyone is stressed out of their minds, it's because Albiels are the gatekeepers between level 4 dabblers and level 5 professionals. You want Auror training, curse breaking, serious research? You need top scores in data, potions, transfiguration, charms, no outstanding, no access. The wizarding world's most dangerous jobs are literally locked behind a report card. 6th and 7th year are where Hogwarts quietly breeds demigods. Non-verbal magic becomes mandatory. You're brewing potions that can rewrite memory or luck. You're learning magic complex enough that a single miscast could kill you or turn you into something the Ministry has to quietly bury. This is level 5/6. high-tier combat spells, advanced healing, layered enchantments. It's not just, can you cast it? It's, can you control it while someone is trying to curse your face off? Pattern interrupt. The boring electives are the real cheat codes. Ancient runes and arithmancy? Those are the theoretical backbone of level 8. Runes teaches you how spells are built, how magic is encoded into objects and places. Arithmancy is magical math, probability, structure, the formulas behind enchantments. Put them together, and you're not just casting spells, you're designing them. Every future spell, inventor, curse breaker, or unhinged artifact maker started here, scribbling charts while everyone else was napping in divination. And defense against the dark arts, when it's not being taught by a fraud, a Death Eater, or a guy with Voldemort on the back of his head, is basically how not to die from level 7 and up. Unforgivable curses, dark creatures, cursed objects. Lupin, Moody-ish. Even Snape are trying to give kids survival tools for magic way above the standard curriculum, which, if you've been paying attention, is exactly what keeps Harry alive. Look, nobody was surprised Hogwarts doesn't offer Ancient Soul Magic 101. Level 9 to 10 is off the syllabus. No class in Horcruxes. No official course on love protection or Hallows mastery. But the school quietly hands you the toolkit. Discipline, theory, research skills, and just enough practical insanity that, if you're obsessive or reckless enough, you can go looking for that power yourself. And some people do. So who actually steps off the curriculum and starts playing with the top of the ladder? And what does that do to everyone around them? So who actually walks off the safe, ministry-approved path and starts power leveling in real life? Let's start with the people who treat level 6 and 7 like their Monday commute. Aurors. Aurors are the combat nerds of the wizarding world. These are your level 6-7 specialists, trained to duel in corridors, alleyways, and collapsing safe houses while somebody's trying to kill them. It's not just good at Expelliarmus. We're talking advanced stunning chains, shield layering, and dark arts countermeasures drilled until they can cast under Polyjuice, in disguise, or mid-fall because someone just blew up the staircase. If you're wondering why Harry ends up running the Auror office in his mid-20s, it's because surviving Voldemort is basically the most hardcore internship on your resume. And Auror training is where a lot of witches and wizards quietly jump a level. Nonverbal spells, some wandless work, coordinated team tactics, resisting the Imperius Curse on command. This is where level 5 Hogwarts Duel Club kids get pushed into real level 6 to 7 territory. They're not usually inventing magic, but they are absolutely stress testing it. Every raid is a practical exam with live unforgivables. Curse breakers, though? Different flavor of terrifying. These are the puzzle solvers sitting around level 7-8, the ones who look at a tomb full of screaming runes and think, yeah, I'll go first. Bill Weasley isn't just a cool earring and dragon skin boots. He's dismantling ancient wards, blood curses, and booby-trapped vaults that were designed by people who thought, what if this kills you in 3 different timelines at once, was a fun weekend project. While Aurors fight dark wizards, Cursebreakers fight the leftover magic dark wizards were too scared to poke. They operate way beyond New Tea theory. You're decoding layered enchantments, counter-cursing traps that react to your fear, and occasionally dealing with magic so old even Gringotts is like, we don't ensure that. Which, if you've been paying attention, is basically how you end up brushing against level 9 ancient magic without a Hogwarts founder in sight. Then you've got healers at St. Mungo's, who are like the quiet overachievers of the ladder. They're not throwing killing curses, but they're working with high-level restorative magic, complex potions, and body and mind spells that make standard charms homework look like finger painting. Long-term curse reversal, spell damage, memory repair, regrowing bones after Lockhart annihilates them. This is steady level 7 energy, with spikes into level 8 when they start using experimental treatments. Some of those treatments? Borderline spell invention, tweaking existing charms, combining potions with runic stabilizers, trying things that were only ever footnotes in ancient runes essays. It's research plus triage. If you mess up, your patient doesn't just get a 0, they grow an extra arm. All 3 paths shove people beyond their school-era ceilings because they're constantly in contact with level 7-10 magic. Aurors see unforgivables and dark rituals. Cursebreakers handle founder-era wards. Healers patch up the survivors of both. You do that for 10 years, you're not the same witch or wizard who sat your Aueels. And while the Ministry, Gringotts, and St. Mungo's try to wrap rules and paperwork around that power, the real problem is who learns all this and then walks away. The unsupervised geniuses, the off-the-grid dark wizards, the people with aura training, cursebreaker tricks, healer knowledge, and no oversight. How bad can that get? Yeah, take a moment. We'll get to that later, when we climb into the top of the ladder and look at the people playing with reality itself. So if level 9 and 10 magic is basically reality's cheat codes, the obvious question is, who's supposed to be in charge of that? The answer the wizarding world gives you is the Ministry. The answer magic gives you is, LOL, no. Let's start with the stuff the Ministry actually can see. Animagi, unforgivable curses, underage magic. All very neat, very form-driven, very sign here so we can pretend this is under control. Animagi have to register their form, markings, and distinguishing features, because apparently the solution to shape-shifting spies is a filing cabinet. Underage magic gets tracked by the trace, so your 11-year-old can't casually blow up Aunt Marge without someone sending a letter. And the unforgivable curses? Those are straight-up level 7 weapons fenced off by life sentences in Azkaban. On paper, that looks tough. In practice, it's adorable. Voldemort and his Death Eaters were tossing around Cruciatus and Avada Kedavra like party favors, while the Ministry was still arguing about cauldron bottom thickness. Look, nobody was surprised when the laws didn't exactly stop Bellatrix. Because here's the real tell. The Ministry's absolute terror of people who brush level 9. Dumbledore and Voldemort break their brains. Fudge spends years pretending Voldemort isn't back, not because he's stupid, but because he knows you can't arrest that. You can only deny it and hope the newspapers cooperate. With Dumbledore, every minister ends up in this weird, anxious friendship where they're like, please keep saving the world, but also stop terrifying us at budget meetings. If you're wondering where the Ministry puts the stuff it can't legislate, that's the Department of Mysteries. The one place in the building that openly studies level 10 adjacent phenomena: love, death, time, thought, prophecy. Rooms full of whispering brains, spinning time-turners, that archway with the veil that everyone treats like a haunted doorway to don't ask questions. This is where unspeakables poke at the raw code of the universe, while everyone upstairs pretends they're just doing, like, extended weather reports. And here's the irony. The people most qualified to understand ancient magic are the ones literally called unspeakables. Their whole job description is, know too much, say nothing. So the closest thing the wizarding world has to level 10 experts are also the gatekeepers, making sure that knowledge never ends up in a textbook where, you know, Harry might actually read it before walking into a death chamber, which, if you've been paying attention, makes the whole system feel incredibly fragile. Lily's sacrifice already rewrote the rules once, wrapping Harry in love-based ancient magic that Voldemort couldn't hack. That wasn't a committee decision. That was one desperate mum on one very bad night. And the scary part? The conditions for another reality-bending event are still out there. One bad prophecy, one experimental charm, one act of love or hate in exactly the wrong place, and level 10 could flare up again, rewriting everything the ministry thinks it controls. So who's really steering the ship when magic itself can change the map overnight? We'll get to that later, when we talk about the witches and wizards standing closest to the next rewrite. If the ministry is busy pretending it runs the wizarding world, the Department of Mysteries is in the basement, quietly studying the code of the universe. This is where magic stops being cool light show and starts being, please don't sneeze near that, time will explode. Let's start with the time room. Clocks everywhere, a bell jar that casually yo-yos a bird between egg and adulthood, and rows of time turners locked up like magical nuclear warheads. Time turners are basically the ministry's one, fragile interface with time magic. Incredibly precise, tightly regulated, and apparently so dangerous that when that shelf shatters in Order of the Phoenix, nobody ever rebuilds it. If you're wondering why we never see them again, it's because time magic clearly lives way up the scale. You don't get infinite do-overs without the universe charging interest. Next door, the death chamber. Stone benches, a sunken pit, and that veil. Just a ragged curtain in an archway, whispering to anyone who gets too close, like a very unhelpful ASMR channel. Sirius falls through it mid-duel, mid-spell, mid-black family drama. And that's it. No counter-curse, no Axio Godfather, not even Dumbledore can drag him back. Which, if you've been paying attention, is wild. We've seen Phoenix Tears, Horcruxes, Hallows, literal resurrection rituals. But the veil is a hard one-way boundary. Level 9 wizards can dance around death. This thing is death's locked back door. Then you've got the Hall of Prophecy, which looks like a warehouse designed by fate itself. Endless shelves of glass orbs, each one a recording of someone glimpsing level 10 magic. Prophecies in Harry Potter aren't just predictions. They're fixed anchor points that warp events around them, whether or not anyone understands the wording. Voldemort tries to dodge his prophecy and ends up fulfilling it. Classic cell phone. The orb is just the voicemail. The real power is whatever cosmic system decided that message needed to exist in the first place. Pattern interrupt. Tiny blue brains in tanks. The brain room is the weirdest one, and that's saying something in a building that contains a death curtain. Those tendrils that attack Ron? That's thought made physical, memory, and intellect, and maybe even creativity, turned into sticky, strangling matter. It's research into consciousness itself, not just legilimency party tricks. Put it together, and the unspeakables are basically poking the scaffolding of reality with very long sticks. Time, death, fate, thought. All the stuff that sits in the same neighborhood as Seers, the Deathly Hallows, and sacrificial magic like Lily's protection, or Harry walking into the forest. These aren't just big spells, they're fundamental rules. The prophecy about Harry, the Elder Wand's loyalty, the veil's finality, the way love magic rewrites killing curses. These are all echoes of level 10. So who actually gets to touch that level on purpose, not just in a ministry lab with safety goggles? For now, let's celebrate that most wizards will never get anywhere near it. Then we'll talk about the terrifying few who do. So if level 10 is where reality itself starts glitching, what happens when the ones bending it aren't even human? This is where your neat little ladder of power gets messy, because the wizarding world is full of beings who never opened a standard book of spells and still clown on most adults. Let's start with house elves, the tiny kitchen workers the ministry barely acknowledges. Yeah, take a moment. These guys are casually throwing around level 6-7 magic while folding socks. They apparate in and out of Hogwarts like it's a Tesco, bypassing wards that stump fully trained aurors. They perform wandless, non-verbal magic as their default setting, from levitation to advanced cleaning charms to binding magic that can physically restrain wizards. Dobby blasts Lucius Malfoy down a corridor with a finger snap. Creature tracks Mundungus, kidnaps him, and sidelongs him back to Grimmauld Place without a wand or a license. If you're wondering who's really overpowered here, it's not the guy in the fancy robes. The catch is that house elves are magically hardwired with compulsion and loyalty, which, if you've been paying attention, is its own kind of dark enchantment. They have the raw power of upper mid-level wizards, but it's caged inside centuries of binding magic and social control. Our 10-level system can measure the output, but not the chains wrapped around it. Now jump to the opposite problem: Dementors. These things aren't casting anything. They are the spell. Walking manifestations of emotional and soul-level magic, weaponize depression with cloaks. They drain joy, corrode hope, and, if you get the full kiss, rip out your soul like it's a removable USB. That's not level 3 charm work. That's deep, primal magic, acting on the core of a person. The only consistent counter: the Patronus charm, which is already treated as elite in the books. Producing a full corporeal Patronus is basically a level 7 emotional superpower achievement. You're channeling focused, positive memory into a radiant, semi-sentient guardian that physically shoves back soul eaters. It's like saying, "My happiness is stronger than your existential horror," and being right. Giants and dragons sit in a different category. They're not out here doing silent, wandless rituals. They're just enormous, magically resistant tanks. A giant with a club can end a level 4 wizard's career in one swing. Dragons shrug off basic stunning spells, breathe fire hotter than your Awiel panic, and fly. But with preparation, coordinated tactics, and higher-level magic, shielding charms, advanced transfiguration, area control spells, level 7-9 witches and wizards can bring them down. Think Tri-Wizard champions, skilled aurors, or McGonagall animating an army of statues. Then you've got centaurs, who quietly break the syllabus. They blend divination and astronomy, reading the movements of the planets as a literal script for fate. It's not crystal ball guesswork. It's a non-human operating system for prophecy and cosmic magic. Ferenzi teaching at Hogwarts is basically the school admitting, "Yeah, our chart for this stops at level 9. He's using a different scale." All of this exposes the big secret. Our 10-level system is human-centric. Wands, exams, ministry classifications. But underneath, house elves, dementors, giants, dragons, and centaurs are all tapping into the same underlying forces: emotion, life, death, the stars, just through wildly different interfaces. So where do the terrifying few humans sit who can bridge that gap and start acting like creatures of myth themselves? We'll get to that later. So, if magic is this giant, shared operating system, who actually gets admin access? Is it all in the blood? Or can you grind your way up the ladder if you start as a nobody with a broken wand and anxiety? Let's start with the purebloods, because of course they want to go first. Families like the Blacks and the Malfoys treat magic like an aristocratic birthright. Old money, old wands, old portraits judging you from the staircase. Bloodline absolutely opens doors socially. You get private tutors, family grimoires, cursed heirlooms that probably scream at you in Latin. But if you're wondering whether that automatically launches you to level 9 spell slinging, yeah, take a moment. Draco Malfoy grows up in a manor full of dark artifacts and still spends most of the series stuck at mid-level school magic. Now compare that to Hermione Granger. 0 wizarding relatives. 2 dentists. She walks into Hogwarts, and by 3rd year she's casually doing 3rd and 4th year spells at once with a time turner, while purebloods copy her homework. The system treats her as an outsider, but her raw talent plus obsessive study rockets her up the scale. Blood gave the Malfoys status. Grind gave Hermione power. And then you've got Lily Evans, another Muggle-born, but she goes from accidental childhood magic to high-level ancient protection magic in about 2 decades. Dumbledore literally points to her sacrifice as a form of magic older than modern spellcraft. That's not just good grades. That's someone whose emotional power and talent plug straight into the deep, primordial stuff. On the flip side, you have Neville Longbottom, poster child for late bloomer and please stop losing the class pet. He's from a powerful pureblood family, which, if you've been paying attention, should have made him a prodigy. Instead, he spends early books at, level 2, blowing up cauldrons and forgetting passwords. But trauma, a supportive environment, and real stakes change everything. By the war's end, he's pulling off advanced dueling club spells, leading the resistance, and decapitating Nagini. That's solid level 5-6 combat competence from the kid who couldn't keep track of his own toad. Squibs are the glitch in the pure-blood matrix. Filch, Ariana's uncontrolled outbursts, the way pure-blood families whisper about non-magic relatives. They prove that even in stacked bloodlines, magical potential can just skip. Apparently, the inheritance pattern is messy, probabilistic, and extremely uninterested in your family tree wall tapestry. Then you've got Harry. Not the smartest in class, not the most technically precise, but thrown into life-or-death scenarios every single year. Constant trauma speedruns him through the levels. He's doing advanced Patronus work at 15, resisting the Imperius curse, surviving killing curses twice, and mastering Hallows-level artifacts while some adults are still struggling with non-verbal spells. Opportunity plus mortal terror is a brutal training program, but it works. So where would you land on this scale if you grew up in the wizarding world? Are you a Hermione grinder, a Neville late-game carry, or a Draco coasting on family clout? Hold that thought, because to answer it properly, we have to climb into the really dangerous end of the chart. The people who don't just use magic, they start to rewrite its rules. These top-tier witches and wizards aren't just stronger. They're playing a slightly different game. To really see the power gap, you have to zoom in on the smallest unit of magic, a single spell. Let's start with the basic recipe. Every spell you've ever seen is a combo of 3 things: the incantation, the wand movement, and the caster's intent. Say the words, flick the stick, want the result. First years treat this like a cooking show. Follow the textbook. Don't set anything on fire. For now, let's celebrate. But the secret 4th ingredient is where levels kick in. Will. Raw, focused, stubborn, magical will. 2 people can shout the same Latin nonsense with the same wrist movement and get wildly different results because the higher level caster is pouring more controlled power into the exact same framework. Take Expelliarmus. In theory, it's baby's first dueling spell. It's literally on the safe menu for school tournaments. In most hands, it just pops someone's wand away, and everyone politely claps. In Harry's hands, it ends up being a battlefield sledgehammer. He uses that one basic spell to blast wands out of Death Eater's hands, break stalemates, and, during his final showdown with Voldemort, lock horns with the Elder Wand and walk away alive. Yeah, take a moment. If you're wondering how a disarming charm stands up to Avada Kedavra, that's the point. The spell isn't secretly overpowered. Harry is. His will, his refusal to use the killing curse, and the ancient protections tied to his wand and Voldemort's soul mess turn a level 2 textbook charm into a level 7-8 event. Same spell, entirely different tier because of who's casting and what's backing it. Dark spells crank this up even further. You can't just mumble Crucio like you're taking attendance and expect results. We literally see Harry try it on Bellatrix and fail because he doesn't want to cause deep, sustained pain the way she does. Dark magic feeds on focused negative emotion, hatred, cruelty, the desire to dominate. That's why not everybody who learns the words can actually pull off an unforgivable. Their will doesn't line up with the spell's vibe. Now jump to the real monsters of the curve, advanced casters who treat spells like clay instead of glass. A lower-level witch fires Stupefy and gets one neat red bolt. A level 8 can silently cast it, widen the beam, punch it through a shield, or split it between targets mid-duel. Same incantation, completely customized output. This is where Snape and Dumbledore live. Snape is literally scribbling better versions of spells in the margins, inventing Sectum Sempra, and tweaking standard hexes for more precision and power. Dumbledore? He's improvising in real time, chaining transfiguration, barriers, and counters like he's speedrunning the syllabus, which, if you've been paying attention, is what separates levels 8 to 9 from everyone else. They're not obeying the recipe. They're rewriting it while the cauldron is boiling. And if you're thinking, okay, what's above that? What happens when the recipe itself is ancient, or alive, or fights back? We'll get to that later, when we hit the top of the chart, and the magic even Dumbledore treats like a loaded wand pointed at reality. So how do you actually spot those levels in the wild? You watch people try to kill each other. Dueling is the diagnostic exam Hogwarts never puts on the timetable, and the series is basically one long practical test. Let's start with the graveyard. Harry versus Voldemort in Goblet of Fire is a level 4 kid accidentally plugged into a level 9 power outlet. Voldemort is nonverbal, relaxed, casually throwing Cruciatus around like he's testing a new remote. Harry? He's shouting Expelliarmus like it's the only word he studied for the exam, because it is. The duel is clumsy, one spell at a time, and the only reason Harry survives is Priori Incantatem and plot armor made of Lily's ancient magic. If you're wondering what real high-level combat looks like, jump to Dumbledore versus Voldemort in the Ministry. That fight is level 9 versus level 9, and it's almost choreographed. Nobody's wasting time yelling basic jinxes. It's non-verbal casting, multi-spell combos, and full environmental manipulation. Dumbledore turns a fountain into a mobile shield, chains water and fire in the same breath, and defends while attacking like he's playing Wizarding World 4D chess. Voldemort responds with possession, shattering glass and snakefire. Yeah, take a moment. That defend while you attack thing is a huge tell. Students and low-tier Death Eaters, they trade shots like a bad video game lobby. Stun, block, pause, repeat. The Battle of the Department of Mysteries is full of people literally ducking behind statues because they can't maintain a shield and cast at the same time. It's level 3 to 5 chaos, with the occasional level 7 spell crashing through. Compare that to McGonagall versus Snape at Hogwarts. 2 level 8s, minimum, having a magical argument at 200 miles an hour. McGonagall launches a barrage of spells that bounce off the walls and converge on Snape from different angles. Snape deflects and redirects them into the Carrows without even breaking formation. It's nonverbal, it's layered, and the room itself ends up part of the duel. They're not just using spells, they're using space. But here's the twist. Your level in a duel is not a fixed stat. Fear, overconfidence, and emotional control all drag the slider up or down. Harry in the graveyard is magically capable of more than he shows, but he's traumatized, wand-shocked, and surrounded by Death Eaters who would absolutely laugh at his Albuel scores. He drops a level in performance. Voldemort in the Ministry gets baited into anger by Dumbledore and starts fighting sloppier, going for big dramatic moves instead of efficient ones. We see the same thing with Bellatrix. Cool, sadistic Bellatrix is a terrifying level 7-8 duelist. Bellatrix after Molly Weasley taps into Mom Rage? Suddenly, she's outmatched because Molly is operating at her absolute emotional peak. For now, let's celebrate that one. Which, if you've been paying attention, tells you something huge. A witch or wizard's true ceiling only shows up in specific, high-stakes conditions. The right fear, the right love, the right desperation. And when you mix that with magic older than wands, older than dueling rules, that's when the scale itself starts to bend. And nobody bends the scale harder than the guy who tried to duct tape his soul to the furniture. Let's start with Horcruxes, because this is where magic stops being cool boarding school tricks and becomes full-on soul engineering. To make a Horcrux, you don't just whisper some edgy Latin at a locket. You need murder. Deliberate, personal, soul-ripping murder. That violent act tears the soul, and then a separate, insanely advanced ritual forces that fragment into an object, wraps it in protective enchantments, and anchors it to the mortal plane. It's dark arts plus ritual magic plus soul theory, all stacked together. Level 8 to 9 territory. You're not just casting a spell, you're rewriting what happens when your body dies. Voldemort, being Voldemort, looks at this already horrifying magic and says, "What if I min-max it?" One Horcrux isn't enough. He makes 6, plus the accidental one in Harry. If you're wondering why he ends up looking like a noseless snake fetus in King's Cross Limbo, that's why. He spreads his soul so thin that he stops being fully human. Less person, more cursed jigsaw puzzle. And you can feel the instability. His emotions are dialed up to 11. His paranoia is feral. And his judgment? Questionable. This is the guy who hides a soul fragment in a cursed diary and just gives it to a random Death Eater's kid. Genius and stupidity, living uncomfortably together in one very damaged magical brain, which, if you've been paying attention, tracks perfectly with level 8 to 9 magic. Massive power, massive side effects. But here's the twist baked into the system. Horcruxes are not invincible. Certain forms of magic are like soul fragment bug spray. Basilisk venom destroys the enchanted container so completely that the fragment can't hold on. Fiendfire, that cursed sentient wildfire, burns hot enough on the magical spectrum to eat straight through the protections. And the Sword of Gryffindor? It absorbs what makes things stronger. It drinks the basilisk venom, becomes a portable Horcrux shredder, and apparently doesn't even chip. That's not random plot convenience. That tells you something about how the wizarding world is wired. Even the darkest magic has counters. Built-in vulnerabilities. You can cheat death, but the system quietly installs a kill switch. Enter Dumbledore. He never makes a Horcrux, but he reverse engineers the whole theory from clues. The diary, the ring, Tom Riddle's obsession with trophies, the weird gaps in his history. He maps out the logic, predicts multiple Horcruxes, and then weaponizes that knowledge. That's level 9. Understanding magic so deeply you can dismantle it without ever casting the forbidden spell yourself. And this sets up the real contrast. Voldemort's approach to level 9 is dominate death, hoard life, cling forever. Harry's is walk into the forest, accept death, and let love do the heavy lifting. One tears the soul apart, one offers it up. So what happens when sacrificial magic, the oldest kind, collides with all this soul hacking? Yeah, take a moment. We're about to go all the way to level 10. So we've been talking about sacrificial love and soul surgery like it's a normal Tuesday, but now we need to deal with the weirdos, the magical outliers, the people who, from birth, basically come with DLC installed. Let's start with Metamorph Magi. Tonks walks on screen, changes her nose into a pig snout for a laugh, and the whole wizarding world just shrugs like, oh yeah, that's a thing. This is not a spell. This is not some advanced level 8 transfiguration exam. She's literally born with a built-in shape-shifting slider menu. No wand. No incantation. No. Professor, I think I got stuck as a chair. Just pure, innate body-morphing magic tied to her emotions and willpower. If you're wondering where that lands on our 10-level scale, it doesn't. Not cleanly. Being a metamorph magus is like being born ambidextrous. It's an advantage, not a rank. Tonks still has to go through the normal Hogwarts grind, still has to pass her new Ts, still has to learn how to duel and track and survive as an Auror. The morphing is a tool. If she never trained it, she'd just be really good at party tricks and bad hair days. Now swing over to Vila. The Bulgarian World Cup mascots show up, start dancing, and suddenly half the stadium is ready to swan dive out of the stands for them. That's not just they're pretty, that's magically weaponized charisma. Fleur Delacour, as a part Vila, walks around with a dialed-down version of that effect all the time. People are intimidated, distracted, sometimes irrationally hostile, because her very existence is poking their emotional wiring. Vila charm doesn't fit neatly either. It's not level 9 mind control. It's more like a passive aura that can be cranked up, focused, or, in Fleur's case, consciously restrained. With training, that allure can become social judo, negotiations, distractions, crowd control, or it can be wasted on making boys at Hogwarts forget how doors work when she walks past. And this is the pattern with all these genetic glitches. They sit sideways to the ladder. They don't automatically make you Dumbledore 2.0. They just hand you a weird, powerful starting item. The question is, what do you do with it? Tonks uses her gift for undercover work, stealth, and morale. Another metamorph magus could end up using it to cheat on exams and catfish people on wizarding dating apps. Same ability, wildly different level of impact. Look, nobody was surprised that the wizarding world mostly treats this stuff as gossip fodder. Vila are booked as entertainers and mascots. Metamorph magis are quirky. Seers are that odd aunt you avoid at Christmas. These aren't framed as strategic assets. They're curiosities, social advantages, or if you're a bitter pureblood, things to rant about at dinner, which, if you've been paying attention, feeds straight back into our core idea. Your level isn't what you're born with. It's how far you push it. Harry's protection comes from love, but he has to choose to walk into the forest. Tonks is born rare, but she has to train like everyone else. Fleur has Vila allure, but her actual power shows when she's dragging her sister out of a deadly lake. So what happens when someone with one of these innate hacks also climbs into the truly ancient stuff we're about to hit? For now, let's celebrate the glitchy kids. Next, we're going to look at the people who don't just bend the rules of magic, they write new ones. So you've got glitchy kids and ancient hacks. Cool. But in Harry Potter, your power level is only as good as the stick in your hand. Wand lore is where this whole system stops being theoretical and starts punching people through windows. Let's start with Ollivander's favorite line. The wand chooses the wizard. That is not just quirky shop banter. That is the entire operating system of modern spellcasting. Different woods, different cores, different flexibilities, all resonate with different temperaments. Holly with phoenix feather for a stubborn, brave disaster magnet like Harry. Vine with dragon heartstring for Hermione, who treats homework like a full-contact sport. It's not random. It's matchmaking. The wand is basically saying, yeah, I can work with this chaos. If you're wondering why this matters for levels, imagine trying to play a violin concerto on a kazoo. Technically possible? Maybe. Emotionally damaging? Absolutely. A well-matched wand amplifies what you're already good at and smooths over what you're shaky on. That's why some kids light up half the shop on their first try, while others go through a full unhinged scavenger hunt of boxes before anything sparks. But it gets even messier because wands aren't just compatible, they're loyal. Allegiance is a whole separate stat. The Elder Wand is the most dramatic example, but the rule is general. Disarm or defeat someone, and their wand can shift its loyalty to you. Not always instantly, not always completely, but the potential is there. That's why Draco accidentally ends up as the master of the most dangerous wand in history, just by snatching Dumbledore's in Half-Blood Prince. Kid was trying for extra credit in Evil 101 and tripped into a global power imbalance. Look at what happens when people lose their perfect match. Harry snapping his Holly wand? His effective level drops hard. He spends months fighting with Hermione's and then Draco's wand, and you can feel the lag. Same spells, less punch, less reliability. Bellatrix losing her wand at Malfoy Manor? She reacts like someone just deleted her entire search history in front of the Wizengamot. For someone that lethal, that specific tool is a massive part of her threat level. And yeah, take a moment. Because even the big names feel this. Dumbledore with a random Ollivander special is terrifying. Dumbledore with the Elder Wand is a walking magical nuke. The Elder Wand doesn't create skill out of nowhere. It multiplies what's already there, which, if you've been paying attention, is the whole point of this power scale. Tools don't replace talent. They expose it. High-level witches and wizards can compensate better. They can cast non-verbally, sometimes wandlessly, brute force their way through a mismatch. But nobody is operating at 100% with a sulking, half-loyal wand. Your innate magic, your training, and your wand are all multiplying each other. Change one, the whole equation shifts. And when we step into truly ancient magic, where even wands start looking optional, that's where the scale bends again. So if wands are optional at the top, where does that leave your phone? Let's drop our shiny 10-level magic scale next to the Muggle world and see who actually wins the duel. Electricity or enchantments? Let's start with the baby stuff. Level 2 and 3 magic is basically Hogwarts, Home Edition. Lumos? That's a flashlight. Only instead of rummaging for AA batteries at 2 a.m., you mutter one word and your wand becomes a tactical torch. Nox is the off switch. Axio? That's your TV remote, your Bluetooth tracker, and your Roomba, except it doesn't need Wi-Fi, and it won't say recalculating when you stand up. Early magic overlaps hard with everyday tech. Need to send a message? You've got owls, we've got texting. Need to wash dishes? They've got Scourgify, we've got a dishwasher that breaks every 3 years. If you're wondering where the wizards start to pull away, it's when we hit instant travel. Apparition is the rage quit button on commuting. No traffic, no TSA, just pop. I'm in Paris. I might be missing an eyebrow, but I'm here. Muggle tech can't touch that. The closest we've got is a budget airline and a 6-hour delay. Memory modification? Obliviate is like hard resetting someone's brain, while we're over here with therapy, CCTV, and awkward apologies. And once you slide into soul magic, Horcruxes, Hallows, Lily's ancient love protection, you're way past anything electricity can do. Your laptop cannot anchor your shredded soul to the mortal plane. It can barely anchor a Zoom call. Arthur Weasley is the giant neon sign that wizards underestimate Muggle problem-solving. The man collects plugs like cursed artifacts. He's fascinated because, from a wizard's point of view, you did all this without magic? You maniacs! Cars, the underground, space travel, ballpoint pens. Muggles brute-forced an entire civilization using physics and stubbornness, which, if you've been paying attention, is exactly the kind of obsessive energy that makes a terrifying dark wizard, just with spreadsheets instead of killing curses. But could Muggle tech actually counter mid-level magic? A little. Surveillance cameras don't care about disillusionment if you were visible 10 seconds earlier. Thermal imaging laughs at invisibility cloaks. A level 4 wizard with a shield charm still has to respect ballistics. Expelliarmus doesn't stop a drone strike. You can't Protego a satellite. Pattern interrupt. Imagine Voldemort trying to Horcrux his soul into the cloud. Yeah, take a moment. Once you climb to level 9 and 10, though, reality bending, wand optional, love and death contract magic. Muggle tech just folds. You can't firewall ancient sacrificial protection. You can't patch update destiny. At that tier, electricity is background noise. For now, let's celebrate that most of Hogwarts sits in the weird overlap. Your phone can't cast Lumos, but your wand can't stream Netflix. And the real question is not just who's stronger, but who actually understands the rules of the game we're about to break wide open in the next level. So now that we've broken magic into levels, let's talk about the people the system swore would never climb very high. The so-called background characters who quietly walk up the ladder while everyone's busy staring at the boy who lived. Let's start with Neville Longbottom. First-year Neville is peak level 2 energy. Lost his toad, lost his passwords, lost at least 3 teeth to rogue broomsticks. This is the kid Hermione literally body binds for his own safety. His magic is there, but it's clumsy, accidental, leaking out. In the worst ways because his confidence is sitting somewhere in the Hogwarts basement. But if you've been paying attention, the seeds are already there. He survives falls that should snap him in half. He shows up to the DA terrified and still signs his name. Under Lupin and then Harry, he starts nailing practical spells, Stupefy, Expelliarmus, even Reducto. By 5th year, he's moved into solid level 4 territory, reliable dueling magic, non-verbal attempts, real battlefield instincts. Then comes Deathly Hallows. The Carrows take over, Harry's gone, and suddenly Neville has no safety net. No, I'm just bad at magic excuse. What happens when you rip away the Owell charts and throw him into live fire resistance work? He jumps, straight into level 5-6. He's leading the DA, using the Room of Requirement like a strategic headquarters, pulling off constant sabotage, surviving Cruciatus, and still cracking jokes. That's not a glow-up, that's a full system upgrade. And then the moment. The sword. Nagini. While Voldemort is giving his final TED Talk on how death is good actually, Neville steps forward, pulls Gryffindor's sword from the sorting hat, and decapitates the last Horcrux in one swing. That is high-tier magical synergy, chosen weapon, true courage, and a spell-free, destiny-backed execution that puts him toe-to-toe with level 6 heroes. He ends up as herbology professor, shaping new generations, casually commanding plants that would eat first-year Neville for breakfast. Yeah, take a moment. Now, Luna, if you're wondering where she sits, she's never the loudest caster in the room, but her power curve is weirdly vertical. Luna's magic is wrapped around emotional resilience. She sees thestrals, hears voices behind the veil, gets kidnapped, imprisoned, mocked, and somehow stays. Luna. Calm, centered, quietly unbreakable. She can cast a full corporeal Patronus in Dumbledore's army, which, if you've been paying attention, is advanced magic that many adult witches and wizards can't manage. That takes focus, self-knowledge, and the ability to summon genuine joy in a war zone. That's late level 4 emotional mastery feeding into level 5 spell work. Both Neville and Luna absolutely thrive the second you remove rigid academic expectations and throw them into real-world resistance. No more, you're bad at exams. Just, can you survive this Death Eater raid? The answer is yes. Repeatedly. Look, nobody was surprised that the Wizarding World's grading system missed this. It massively underestimates the kind of intelligence and courage that only wake up when the stakes are life and death. Textbook trivia? Optional. Choosing to stand up when you're shaking? That's the real test, and by the end of this ladder, we're going to ask you something dangerous. Not just which level you'd hit, but whose arc you actually match. Are you a hidden Neville, a Luna, or someone even stranger? We'll get to that later. So if magic level isn't just about who cries the least while doing homework, what about the people who are weirdly powerful without being magically impressive? Let's start with everyone's favorite ministry toad, Dolores Jane Umbridge. Umbridge is not a magical heavyweight. She's not dueling Dumbledore. She's not inventing spells. She's not out here bending reality. At best, she's sitting in that level 3-4 range. Solid core curriculum, can handle standard charms and defensive spells, probably passed her newts by weaponizing extra credit and passive aggression. She can cast a decent stunning spell, sure, but she's way more dangerous with a quill than with a wand. Because what Umbridge does is weaponize institutions. Hogwarts, the Ministry, educational decrees. She walks into a school of young witches and wizards and, with almost no high-level magic, turns the entire place into a surveillance state. If you're wondering how scary mid-tier magic can get, it's when you combine it with unchecked authority, cruelty, and a total lack of conscience. She doesn't need unforgivable curses when she has blood quills and legal loopholes. Look, nobody was surprised that she folded the second real power showed up in the forest. Centaurs? Chaos. Her magic level isn't what keeps people in line. It's her ability to get the ministry, the daily prophet, and terrified parents all pointing in the same direction. That's the fraud problem. She feels like a level 7 threat, but she's casting level 3-4 spells with level 9 institutional backup. Now swing over to Gilderoy Lockhart, the human peacock. On paper, his reputation screams level 6-7. Dueling werewolves, erasing banshees, publishing best-selling autobiographies between haircare routines. In reality, he's a low level 3 at best, barely holding his wand the right way around in a crisis. The one thing he's actually good at is a single high-level spell, memory charms. And even that goes sideways the second he upgrades to Ron's broken wand. Yeah, take a moment. The man whose entire career is built on one spell can't even adapt when the conditions change. Advanced wizards at higher levels manage non-verbal magic, wandless magic, complex defensive chains. Lockhart can't even manage don't obliviate yourself in a cave. But socially? He's stacked. He weaponizes public opinion, celebrity culture, and Hogwarts' need for a defense against the dark arts teacher. The wizarding world loves a pretty face with a good story, which, if you've been paying attention, is way easier to sell than boring competence. He fakes his way into a job that should go to a level 5-6 duelist, then nearly kills students through sheer incompetence. Together, Umbridge and Lockhart are your cautionary tale. Magical level and social rank are not the same bar. Underestimate weak wizards, and you can literally end up tortured in detention or memory wiped in a tunnel. Overestimate them, and you trust people who cannot protect you when real power walks in. For now, let's celebrate that the series keeps calling this out. Because as we climb into the higher tiers of magic, you're going to see the opposite problem too. Quietly terrifying wizards hiding in plain sight, pretending they're ordinary. We'll get to that later. And war is where those quietly terrifying wizards get forged, because nothing levels you up faster than realizing a killing curse has your name on it. Repeatedly. Let's start with the basic rule of the Second Wizarding War. Survive a few life-or-death encounters, and your magic either skyrockets or shatters. The DA goes from Expelliarmus Practice Club to a functional resistance cell. These are kids who were sneaking butterbeer into the room of requirement, and a year later they're pulling off coordinated shield formations, non-verbal jinxes, and guerrilla tactics in a castle under siege. That's not curriculum. That's survival XP. Same with the Order and the Death Eaters. Look, nobody was surprised that people like Bellatrix and Dolohov felt overpowered. They've been living in the deep end for years. But even the mid-tier fighters get dragged up a level because the battlefield doesn't let you stay average. You either learn to cast fast, silently, from cover, or you end up a name on the memorial wall. And trauma is the ugly engine under that power creep. For some characters, it sharpens everything. Harry's magic is always tied to emotion, but by Deathly Hallows, he's channeling fear, grief, and rage into razor-focused spellwork. He casts Cruciatus effectively for the first time in the middle of a torture-level stress moment. Neville? This boy goes from losing his toad to leading an underground resistance, pulling off high-level defensive magic, and swinging the sword of Gryffindor like it's a slightly judgmental baseball bat. Yeah, take a moment. But the war doesn't treat everyone like a shonen protagonist. The books quietly imply the flip side, magic that destabilizes under stress. You've got shattered veterans, jumpy aurors, and people who probably flinch every time a wand is raised near them. If you're wondering what PTSD looks like in the wizarding world, imagine your intrusive thoughts occasionally turning into accidental magic. That's not just sad, that's dangerous, which is why aurors are such a special case. Kingsley, Tonks, Mad Eye before them. These are people who live at a constant high combat level. Non-verbal, wandless grabs, instant shield charms, split-second threat assessment. That's just Tuesday. The war turns that dial to 11. Kingsley ends up minister partly because everyone has seen him duel while calmly giving tactical instructions, like a magical air traffic controller who can also stun you through a doorway. After the war, Hogwarts has a weird power spike. You've got students returning to Transfiguration who have literally fought giants, snatchers, and Death Eaters in the same corridors where they used to worry about homework. No textbook can compete with "I learned Protego while being shot at." The baseline for what a 7th year can do is permanently higher. And underneath all of this is the real secret of our whole level system. Magic is welded to emotion and will. War either forges that connection into steel or cracks it down the middle. The next levels? They're where that emotional engine gets weaponized into dark arts, soul magic, and the kind of ancient power even Dumbledore side-eyes. We'll get to that later. Which means it's time to turn the wand around. If you woke up tomorrow in the wizarding world, where would you actually land on this magic scale? Not your Hogwarts OC in your notes app. You. Let's start with archetypes, because apparently Hogwarts is just one big personality quiz with trauma. If you're the kid who color codes their notes and reads the textbook before class even starts, that's the Hermione path. You're grinding levels 2-4 fast, mastering first-year spells, nailing non-verbal basics by owls, and casually doing household charms like it's brushing your teeth. Laundry? Scourgify? Dishes? Turgio. Your dorm is spotless, and your roommates both love and fear you. If you're more wing it and hope for plot armor, that's the Harry path. You're not top of the class, but in a crisis your magic spikes. You'd be the one accidentally jumping to level 5 in a duel because someone threatened your friends. Homework? Mid. Patronus charm under pressure. Nailed it. Strategists, you're the Ron path. You might not be inventing new spells, but you see the board. You'd pick arithmancy or ancient runes, not because they're fun, but because they set you up for a level 4-5 job at the Ministry, Gringotts, or some wildly specific Department of Mysteries desk where you push papers that occasionally scream. Late bloomers, welcome to the Neville path. Maybe your first 2 years are a magical train wreck. Broken quills, miscast charms, plants trying to eat you. But once you find your niche, herbology, care of magical creatures, whatever, you rocket from level 2 to level 6 in that one lane. Which, if you've been paying attention, is exactly how people end up teaching at Hogwarts. Then there's the specialist path. The Snape or McGonagall energy. You pick one area, potions, transfiguration, healing, and you just live there. Day to day, level 3, you're doing basic household and school magic. Level 4 or 5, you're working in competitive jobs. St. Mungo's trainee healer, Gringotts curse removal intern, Ministry research goblin. Level 6-7, that's Auror, curse breaker, unspeakable. High risk, high reward, high chance of your mum sending you weekly howlers. So imagine your Hogwarts timetable. Are you dropping divination the second you can? Or are you that person who absolutely signs up for ancient runes, arithmancy, and care of magical creatures all at once because it'll be fun? If you love puzzles and patterns, you're probably aiming at runes, arithmancy, maybe a future in spell design at level 6. If you're the friend group medic, you're screaming healer and grinding potions and charms like your life depends on it. Now pick your dream specialization. Animagus? That's advanced transfiguration, rock-solid control, probably level 6 before the Ministry even lets you file the paperwork. Legilimency or occlumency? You're in the deep end of mind magic, flirting with level 7 and the Dumbledore side-eye zone. Healer? Long road, but by the time you're reversing cursed wounds, you're sitting comfortably at level 6-7. Curse breaker? You live in pyramids and cursed tombs now. Congrats. So, honest audit. What level are you right now based on your real-world habits? What level would you want to reach, and whose trajectory feels closest? Hermione, Harry, Ron, Neville, or Snape McGonagall? Drop it in the comments because for now, let's celebrate your inner witch or wizard. And then ask what happens when that same scale gets pushed into dark arts, soul magic, and the kind of ancient power that doesn't care who you think you are. So let's talk about the cage match everyone secretly wants. Ancient magic versus dark arts. Killing curses, soul fragments, blood rituals on one side. And on the other, Lily Potter's mom-powered nuke and a set of hallows that basically ignore your ego. Who actually wins if you've been paying attention to how the wizarding world works? Let's start with the dark arts hype reel. Dark magic is flashy, immediate, and absolutely terrifying. Avada Kedavra drops you in one hit. Crucio doesn't just hurt, it breaks people. Imperius hijacks your free will like it's a dodgy browser extension. These spells bypass a ton of normal defenses. You can't just Protego your way out of every unforgivable. That's why Voldemort looks unstoppable. He stacks unforgivables, Horcruxes, and blood magic together, and suddenly regular dual rules don't apply anymore. And it's not just the damage, it's the psychological terror. When a guy walks into a room and people literally sprint away because they're scared he'll think the word die too hard, that's power. The dark arts weaponize fear itself. They spread faster than a Hogwarts rumor. They corrupt people. They make entire governments fold. In the short term, dark wins the scoreboard. Bodies, chaos, trauma. 10 out of 10 would not recommend. But then you hit the stuff Voldemort can't quantify. Ancient magic. The kind Dumbledore keeps side-eyeing and saying, yeah, that's older than spells. Lily's sacrifice is the poster child. Voldemort fires a killing curse at a baby, rebounds, and ends up living as a haunted gas cloud for a decade because a mother chose to die instead of step aside. No wand movement. No incantation. Just a rule baked into the universe that says, you don't get to touch this child. If you're wondering whether that's a fluke, look at the Elder Wand. Dark wizards treat it like a murder trophy. Kill the owner. Win the stick. Except the allegiance runs deeper. It follows disarming, loyalty, intent. Voldemort never truly owns it because he doesn't understand the underlying law. He thinks domination is enough. The wand quietly disagrees and refuses to kill its real master. Yeah. Take a moment. Same with the Hallows as a set. You can't just Imperio the cloak off someone and become death. The Hallows respond to understanding, not brute force. They resist simple domination in a way that drives dark wizards absolutely insane, because this is level 10 magic operating on narrative rules, not dual rules. That's the pattern. Dark arts look stronger in the moment, but ancient magic writes the long game. Prophecies shape who matters. Blood wards lock whole houses into no-go zones. Sacrificial protections decide which side can actually die. Dumbledore keeps saying Voldemort's real blind spot is love. He's not being poetic. It's a tactical diagnosis. In the final confrontation, Voldemort has the Elder Wand, the killing curse, and zero understanding of why Harry walking into the forest to die for everyone else just rewired the battlefield. Harry repeats Lily's move on a larger scale, and suddenly his friends get a protection buff Voldemort can't crack. So level 10 isn't just stronger spells, it's deeper laws. It's magic that decides what curses are allowed to do in the first place. And once you see that, you start asking what other rules are hiding under the surface of this world. So when you zoom out, the whole saga starts looking less like a cozy school story and more like a video game campaign where the difficulty slider keeps getting cranked up behind your back. Let's start with Harry at literal level 1, the kid in the cupboard who accidentally grows his hair back, vanishes glass at the zoo, and ends up on the roof because Dudley was being Dudley. That's raw, unfocused magic, triggered by panic and emotion. No wand, no Latin, no clue. The power is already there. The rules are not. Book 1 bumps him to level 2 and 3 territory, first-year basics and the standard Hogwarts power curve. Lumos, Wingardium Leviosa, a little Alohomora when Hermione's bored of following the rules. By Chamber of Secrets and Prisoner of Azkaban, we're layering in stronger charms, Patronuses, time travel, animagi. The training montage era. You're watching kids move from magic happens to me to I can actually call my shot. Then Goblet of Fire hits, and the story quietly flips the switch to level 4 and 5. Unforgivable curses, priori incantatem, international dueling, the graveyard resurrection scene. Harry's not just learning spells now. He's being thrown into the deep end of dark arts, blood magic, and wand lore. If you're wondering when this stopped being a school story and became a war story, it's that graveyard. Yeah, take a moment. Order of the Phoenix and Half-Blood Prince push us into level 6 and 7. Prophecy and Horcruxes. The wizarding world's worst guidance counselor moment. Hey, your entire life has been prescripted by a glowing orb. Then Dumbledore's private lessons upgrade Harry from can cast a decent Expelliarmus to let's analyze soul mutilation and cursed rings together. The mechanics of magic are getting darker and weirder right alongside Harry's emotional state. Trauma, anger, grief, and that constant feeling that nobody is telling him the whole truth. By Deathly Hallows, we're living in level 8 and 9. Wandless spells under pressure, breaking into Gringotts, surviving the forest, wielding the Deathly Hallows without turning into Gollum with a wand. Harry's arc tracks from raw power to conscious choice. He stops asking, "What can magic do for me?" and starts asking, "What should I do with it?" That's the emotional graduation exam. And then, level 10, he walks into the forest, accepts death, activates ancient protection, and becomes master of death in the least edgy way possible. That sacrificial magic, that Hallows mastery without obsession, is the top of the ladder. Other characters are climbing their own trees. Hermione speedruns the knowledge route, from read all the books to literally rewriting house elf and blood laws. Neville levels courage, going from dropped remembralls to swinging the sword of Gryffindor. Snape? He's the tragic build. Obsession and regret spec, maxed out in occlumency and dark arts, stuck just below level 10 because he can't quite let go. And once you see where everyone lands on that scale, their wins and failures hit different. For now, let's celebrate that we've mapped the ladder. Next, we're going to start placing people on it, one brutal ranking at a time. All right, brutal ranking time. We've built the ladder, now let's start dropping names on it. And if you're already typing an angry comment about why your fave is secretly level 10, keep it open in another tab, because you might actually be right. Let's start with number 5. The Founders of Hogwarts, counted together as one terrifying group project. Individually, they're probably high level 8s, maybe brushing level 9. Godric's artifact literally auto-upgrades itself with basilisk venom. Rowena designs a castle that rearranges its own staircases. Salazar leaves behind a murder snake and a blood purity kill switch. Helga quietly invents magical food logistics for an entire school. Together, they lay down enchantments that are still running 1,000 years later. That's ancient infrastructure magic. That's level 9 territory. Number 4. Gellert Grindelwald. Charismatic war criminal, visionary nightmare, peak level 9 dark arts specialist. He's not just throwing curses, he's reshaping European politics and casually using wandless magic in Normangard like it's a party trick. He understands Hallows lore, experiments with prophecy, and bends crowds with a sentence. But he never cracks soul magic the way Voldemort does, and he never fully taps love-based protections the way Dumbledore and Harry end up doing. So he stays locked at level 9, king of his era, but not the final boss. Number 3. Voldemort. Tom. I read one book and invented immortality. Riddle is a maxed-out level 9.5. He masters Horcruxes, blood magic, possession, and flight without a broom, which, if you've been paying attention, puts him at the top of modern spellcraft. He bends the Elder Wand, but never truly owns it, because he fundamentally doesn't understand the love magic that keeps ruining his plans. He can tear his soul into confetti, but he can't process basic empathy. Incredible power. Hard cap. Number 2. Albus Dumbledore. The guy Grindelwald feared and Voldemort avoided. He's a flexible level 9 who briefly touches level 10 when he fully understands the Hallows, the prophecy, and Lily's sacrifice working together. He duels Grindelwald across an entire city, manipulates the Elder Wand without being corrupted, and reads ancient magic well enough to plan his own death as a failsafe. He doesn't dominate reality, but he can see the code behind it. Number 1. The Faceless Legends. Merlin, the original creators of the Deathly Hallows, and whoever first weaponized sacrificial love. These are your true level 10s. We never see them on page, but their magic casually rewrites the rules. Cloaks that ignore time, wands that break normal power ceilings, protections that outlast lifetimes. If you're wondering where McGonagall, Snape, and Bellatrix land, they're elite level 8s, maybe low 9s. McGonagall commands a castle of statues like it's Tuesday. Snape invents spells and dances in and out of Voldemort's mind. Bellatrix duels multiple opponents at once while laughing. They're monsters. Just not reality benders. And look, nobody was surprised that raw power isn't the same as narrative importance. Harry's nowhere near the top magically, but the story still orbits him. For now, let's celebrate that the tier list is on the table, because next, we're going to ask a much nastier question. What actually decides who wins in this world, when power alone isn't enough? So if power isn't everything, what is? Let's start with the kids who were supposed to break. The boy in the cupboard, the girl called Bossy, the disaster with the toad, Harry, Hermione, Neville, the ones the wizarding world either ignored, mocked, or outright tried to weaponize. Harry begins literally locked away, doing accidental magic because he's terrified and furious. No wand, no control, just glass vanishing at the zoo and hair growing back overnight. By the end, he's a trained Auror, throwing non-verbal spells in combat, commanding Patronuses, and walking into a forest to die on purpose. Not because he's the strongest in the room, but because he finally decides what his magic is for. Protection, not domination. Neville is the glow-up of the century. First year he's melting cauldrons and getting body-bound by his own friends. He can barely hold on to his wand, which, if you've been paying attention, is the series' way of screaming, "This kid has no agency." After the war, he ends up with his own wand, his own classroom, and a greenhouse full of students who look at him the way he once looked at Harry. As herbology professor, he's not just level 6 competent, he's emotionally level 10. From forgotten kid to the person shaping the next generation of Gryffindors. Yeah. Take a moment. Hermione? The girl everyone dismissed as an overachieving nightmare apparently decides the entire legal system is her next homework assignment. She goes from crying in a bathroom while a troll hunts her to literally rewriting creature rights laws, tearing out anti-Muggleborn nonsense, and professionalizing the Auror office Harry leads. Her magic was always high level. The real arc is that she stops needing teachers' approval and starts using that power to pull other people up with her. Now contrast all that with Voldemort, a level 9 terror who mastered Horcruxes, soul magic, and wandless cruelty. And he gets ended by level 10 forces he refused to understand. Lily's ancient love protection, the Elder Wand's loyalty rules, the magic of Harry choosing to walk back into life when he could have stayed dead. Voldemort spends decades trying to become untouchable and dies a mortal death on a school floor with nobody to mourn him. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Because that's the quiet thesis of the whole power scale. The series does not care how many spells you know if you use them to isolate, control, and terrorize. It cares what you do with your magic, who you protect with it, and who you stand next to while you cast. Community over supremacy. Responsibility over fireworks. And this loops us straight back to that cave fire and Lily's sacrifice. Ancient, wandless, contract-level magic that doesn't look flashy on a spell chart, but rearranges the entire wizarding world. The most impressive magic is often the quietest and the most costly. If you're wondering what really sits at level 10, it's not a bigger explosion. It's the choice to burn for someone else. For now, let's celebrate that our traumatized kids end up as protectors, teachers, and reformers. Because next, we're going to climb all the way up that ladder and ask, what does level 10 actually look like in practice when the magic itself starts rewriting the rules? So now that we've climbed the ladder, here's the dangerous part. You don't just watch this scale, you pick where you stand on it. Right now, no OWL exam, no ministry registration, just vibes and self-awareness. Let's start with your personality build. Are you book-smart level 5 energy, color-coding your spell notes like Hermione, and secretly judging anyone who says Wingardium Leviosa? Or are you battle-ready, wand out before you finish thinking, the kind of person who watched McGonagall duel Snape and went, yeah, that's my final form? Maybe you're the specialist, quietly obsessed with one niche discipline while everything else explodes around you. Or the late bloomer, full Neville arc, who doesn't peak until someone hands you a metaphorical sword of Gryffindor. And then we have the chaos gremlins, the accidental magic crowd, the people who would absolutely vanish the glass at the zoo without meaning to, and then say, oops. Be honest. Which one are you, and what level does that feel like? Now, pick your discipline. If you're wondering what you'd actually train in, this is where it gets fun. Are you grinding animagus training for years just to become a smug house cat who ignores everyone? Diving into legilimency and occlumency, living that I know you're lying lifestyle? Maybe you're the spell creation nerd, locked in a shed like a slightly less unhinged Fred and George, inventing jinxes nobody asked for. Or you're a healer, St. Mungo's core, patching up everyone who thought dueling was a personality trait. Or you're deep in ancient rune research, chasing the kind of primordial magic that made Lily's protection and the Deathly Hallows possible. Tell me which path you'd max out, and what level on this scale you think that would push you to. Pattern interrupt. Stop ranking yourself for a second and start judging everyone else. Because you know you want to. Who in the series do you think is secretly higher than we placed them? Is McGonagall actually flirting with level 9 every time she commands the castle to fight? Does Molly Weasley's "not my daughter, you bitch" moment shoot her up a tier? Who's overrated? Who's criminally underrated? I want arguments, receipts, the whole thing. And when you rewatch, do it with the 10-level lens on. Look for the moments where characters punch way above their supposed weight class, like Neville standing up to Voldemort, or way below, like Lockhart forgetting his own name with a backfired memory charm. Reread the books, pause the films, and call out every time someone accidentally reveals they're operating 2 levels higher, or lower, than the story admits. Because this doesn't stop here. Drop your own tier lists in the comments. Aurors ranked by actual competence, Death Eaters by terrifying factor, Founders by who broke the wizarding world the most. If you want full videos breaking down those groups level by level, this is where you vote for it. For now, let's celebrate that you officially know your build. Next, we're going to stress test it against some very specific, very dangerous magical careers. So, you've built your wizard. You've picked your level. Now zoom out for a second and look at the ladder we just climbed together. Let's start with that first spark. Level 1. Accidental magic. A scared kid on a playground, glass vanishing, hair growing back overnight because emotions are basically a magical nuclear reactor with no safety protocols. From there, we crawled up through Level 2 and 3 classroom basics, Lumos and Wingardium, and please don't explode your cauldron again, Neville territory, into the OWL and NEUWT years where spells stop being party tricks and start deciding who walks away from a duel. After that, the gloves came off. We hit the unforgivables, horcruxes, blood wards, and soul magic. The stuff that makes even experienced aurors go, yeah, I'm good actually. We pushed into rare branches like animagi, metamorph magi, seers, legilimency and occlumency, and wandless, wordless casting that only a tiny fraction of the wizarding world can pull off. And at the top, Level 10, we ran face first into the ancient, half-explained forces underneath everything. Lily's protection, the Deathly Hallows, the Elder Wand amplifying whoever's already terrifying, and Hogwarts itself sitting on layers of enchantments nobody wrote down. Once you see that scale, the whole saga rewires itself. Of course, first-year Harry is flailing with basic charms, while adult Voldemort is casually rewriting his own soul. Of course, Dumbledore and Voldemort feel untouchable. They're playing chess with rules that most people don't even know exist. The books never hand you a neat chart, but if you've been paying attention, the power curve is baked into every class schedule, every duel, every time somebody says, "That's ancient magic," and refuses to elaborate. And here's the emotional core of all of it. The wizarding world was literally built on powers no one fully understands. Founders hiding secrets in castles, wand makers whispering about destiny, death itself allegedly handing out artifacts. The whole system is unstable, weird, and kind of terrifying. But it was saved by people who just used what they had, wherever they were, for someone else. A mum with no elder wand, just a choice. A kid with a scar and a second-hand wand. Teachers and aurors and very tired order members who were absolutely not level 10 but showed up anyway. Look, nobody was surprised that the ultimate weapon wasn't a new curse. It was who chose to cast what. The wizarding world never stood a chance. Against a mother's love, a stubborn kid with a scar, and a very overworked school staff trying to do lesson plans between Dark Lords. If you're wondering where this goes next, we'll get to that later in other videos. We've got deep dives planned on character power rankings, what actually happens to magic after the ministry reforms, and full breakdowns of specific disciplines like legilimency, animagi, and, yes, how close the Auror office is to a workplace safety violation. For now, let's celebrate that you'll never look at a simple Lumos the same way again. If you want more obsessive, lore-deep, slightly unhinged breakdowns of the magic system you grew up with, hit subscribe, tap like, and share this with the one friend who still corrects people on wand movements at parties. Yeah. Take a moment.